My name is Joe Culp, and I sit on the Zionsville Town Council and represent District 4. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I'm excited to help facilitate the dialogue and provide an update on the topic of historic preservation as Zionsville looks ahead at how this may impact the community. Tonight's agenda will begin with a few presentations, then conclude with the opportunity for public feedback. While this gathering is largely informational, I want to thank you all again for making the sacrifice to be here to offer your feedback, regardless of how you feel about this issue. As has been previously stated, there's no imminent action being taken tonight, despite errant reports stating otherwise. My hope is that you all leave here tonight with a better understanding of historic preservation as it relates to Zionsville and some information about proposed next steps. So let me start from the beginning, how I got involved. I was approached 2 years ago by members of the Zionsville Historic Preservation Committee, seeking assistance to help the town adopt an ordinance creating a conservation district, not a historic district, for the village of Zionsville. My council district contains much, if not all, of the area west of 6th Street in the village and many additional neighborhoods west of the village. I take this feedback from community members very seriously, which is why I appreciate opportunities like this meeting to have dialogue on the issues at hand. Personally, I was initially conflicted with this idea. As a lifelong Zionsville resident, I'm passionate about retaining some of the town character with which I grew up. Many years later, as an elected official and business owner, I remain skeptical about additional layers of bureaucracy and burdening the free market with unnecessary restrictions. However, through this process, I've listened. And that is one of the reasons why I'm here tonight, is to listen to you. To be candid, the process or the proposed course of action has evolved throughout the process as we all have gained more information. I continue to be open to all new factual information and allow it to inform my opinions and potential next steps. While there is a draft ordinance currently on the town website that I'm sure most of you have read, is very much a working draft and already requires significant revision, and I'll get into that in a minute. This issue has grown much bigger than just the village, which is why we have invited two presenters tonight who are recognized experts on this topic. We have Paul Lippens from the McKenna Group. Some of you might have heard their presentation last week. And I also have Mark Delosi, with Indiana Landmarks, who's worked with us closely lately. I think that those two will mesh well together on some of the questions that have come to Wayne and I in the last 2 weeks and make a little bit more sense why we're moving a little bit a different way tonight on what we're going to try to accomplish. So here's our agenda for tonight. We'll provide a general update. I'll do that for everybody on what has transpired to date, followed by the presentations from these experts. Following those presentations, we'll open to the floor to the public for comments. Out of respect to everyone present, I would ask that any who wish to make public comments limit their comments to this generic topic. As I mentioned, the draft ordinance online already needs revision, so let us try to focus on other areas for discussion. Thank you for your cooperation. So here's where we're going to start, and we're going to start with the update. Town officials, myself, have been meeting on a regular basis with attorneys and staff to understand what this grassroots-led initiative is hoping to accomplish and why. We're taking this very seriously and the effort put forward by the committee who started this initiative and the many residents who have expressed opinions over the many months it has been in the works. To add some complexity to this mix, the town is also beginning a review of all the town zoning ordinances, and there could be some overlap and synergies with the conservation effort as this moves forward, which were some of the questions that came to us. Given all the moving parts, the town staff, the mayor, and myself representing the town council are in agreement that the best way forward at this juncture is to focus on establishment of a historic preservation commission as our first step in this process, not the village conservation proposal ordinance. That is the group who will be best positioned to consider ordinance language and what neighborhoods might participate in the future. There were some questions submitted in advance of tonight, and the town's plan to capture those questions and any comments expressed tonight into a FAQ section on the town website. This process will continue to be fully transparent going forward, and we'll have more opportunities for public feedback and Q&A sessions so everyone will have an opportunity to comment if they wish. This is the first of what we hope are several sessions to openly discuss this effort. I'd like to thank you again to our neighbors and leaders in influencing what has come to pass already. I'd like to thank the Zionsville Historic Preservation Committee, specifically Mark Walters and Chelsea Overbeck. They've both put in the time and perseverance for this project. I also like to thank the town council lawyer, Heather Willie, and her colleague, Dustin Meeks, who's somewhere around here. Mayor Styron for her thoughts, our excellent town leadership, including Wayne DeLong and Julie Johns Cole, and the town lawyer, Amy Nooning, who I believe is back there as well. Also like to thank Indiana Landmarks, Josh Biggs, I don't know if he's here tonight, and Mark Delossi, I keep saying that wrong. And last but not least, my fellow town council members who continually remind me of their opinions through humor and wisdom. So I would like to start off with Mark. Are you going to go first, or?
Thank you.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here. I recognize a lot of faces. We did a lot of work on the zoning ordinance last week, and it's good to see more of you tonight that I didn't see last week. This is, some really important issues that we're here to discuss a little bit this evening. And I thought that, and one of the reasons why I'm going first is because Mark is an expert in the implementation of the historic districts and conservation districts. And I'm an expert in zoning. So I want to talk a little bit about the relationship between zoning and historic districts. Also, it's a little bit of a report back from what I heard last week. So I got to tune in to some of the issues and some of the goals that I think are there's synergy between what many residents want to achieve with a historic district, but also what many residents would like to achieve through an update to the zoning code. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This is my team. Many of you met. All the members of my team were here last week, except Carrie is our graphic designer, so she was working with us remotely. But everything we did, Carrie's involved with as well. If you saw any of the presentations last week, one of the things I led with was this general store here. This is the general store. It's actually an antique store now, but this is in a village called Dixboro, a historic hamlet where I grew up outside of Ann Arbor. And the reason why I show this is because some of the things that we look for in designing good places, what we talk about as walkable urbanism, places where communities have the things that they need within service of their residences, for their home. These things are common, whether you're in a big city, like the picture on the right here is New York City, which I actually happen to live here as well at one point in my life, to a hamlet, to a historic village like Zionsville. A lot of the design features that make a place walkable and livable are in all of these places, but they present in different forms based on the type of place you are. And one of the things that became apparent about Zionsville is that protecting the character and all the things that make this place special is what we want to code through zoning and through the historic district. So we want to understand the concept, the concepts that this place would like to have the code represent. And then we want to figure out the design values that will help to implement those parts of the code. So I'm going to show you another picture today. This one is particular to this idea of historic districts and zoning. And this is actually my house. I took this morning. I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I live in a historic district. I live in the Vine district. And there's lots of things I still want to do to renovate my house, but what I'm here to tell you about in this story tonight is the door, and actually it's the storm door on the front. So I call this coding a door. So here's a zoom in of that door. This is a combination storm door. And in learning about this door, my first introduction to this particular door was when we were working on a zoning code for Sault Ste. Marie. If you've never been to Sault Ste. Marie, you can find your way to I-75. And, if you're going east from here, take a left and keep driving, and then keep driving more. and drive all the way up until you can't drive anymore, and you'll be in Sault Ste. Marie. It's in the UP, and it's actually a very old city. It was founded in 1668. When we were working on this code, they were coming up on their 350th anniversary. So when we talk about coding historic code and coding a code that actually represents the place, we had some very interesting discussions in the Soo. And we did develop standards that would help to implement their historic character through the zoning code. What we want to do with standards, though, is we want to create these guidelines that nudge the right decision. The codes are about really establishing a precedent and then seeking to get voluntary compliance. The purpose of a code is not to force enforcement, although there is enforcement and they are legally enforceable. What we really want to do is create a code that represents the places that those codes are designed to create. And I highlighted this little bit. This excerpt here, 2.01, is from the architectural standards we created for downtown Sault Ste. Marie. And this thing I highlighted here, any storm and or screen door must also conform to these standards, which the standards of the primary door for the building must be made of wood, stained, and you see these kind of wood requirements both in zoning codes as well as in historic districts. The reason why I highlighted this is because my colleague, Mike Campbell, who some of you met last week, really wanted to spec the particular door that we have in this picture here, and it's made by the Combination Door Company. This company is located in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And Mike and I got in a philosophical debate over whether we could spec a specific door in zoning code. And as you see, I won that debate because we didn't spec this particular door. But his point was really valid. And his point was there are limited people manufacturing goods. And this particular company, he assured me, was the only company that still made this door. And talking about what that means, his point was if you take a historic district like the home that I live in, the Vine, and you just simply take off all of the metal storm doors that people have bought over the years because those are the materials that were available to them, and replace all those doors with this door, the whole district will improve. And so when I moved into historic district, the first thing that I wanted to do was put this door on my house so I could figure out exactly what the process would be, and I did so. And this is an example of the actual district standards for front storm doors and doors in the Vine district. This comes directly from the city of Kalamazoo, and you'll see that these standards here very much replicate the picture of the door that I found. And when I went to my historic district coordinator for approval on this to get a certificate of authenticity.
Appropriate, huh?
Certificate of appropriateness. Thank you, Mark. This is the email I got back. What a perfect storm door, Paul. I've seen doors from that same company that are a century old and still working beautifully. Fill out the attached application, return it to me, and I can prove it immediately. And I felt, and this is from Sharon Ferraro, who is the historic preservation coordinator in Kalamazoo, and the contractors refer to her as the mayor of Vine sometimes. So everybody knows who she is. And the reason why I put this in there is to say that, one, I felt very validated by this email. I felt like I was doing something that was contributing to my neighborhood. I also felt like it was very easy. All I had to do was talk to this person, and this particular type of improvement, she was able to approve administratively. Since then, I have also got administrative approval to put a new roof in because my roof was leaking, and the contractors know how to do this. And one of the reasons why I thought I'd start with this story tonight is because one of the things historic districts are very good at is helping to provide guidance in residential districts. I'm going to talk a little bit about zoning and why I think that that's an appropriate tool for this type of a problem in a little bit, but I wanted to start there. So I'm going to go back to the zoning code here. So what's the purpose of our work to update the Zionsville Town Code? We want to reorganize the land regulations to include form-based standards. So more standards on how places look, how they develop, and is the development in character with what's around them, including design guidelines and administrative procedures. And then ultimately our goal is to eliminate redundancy. Town has a 500-page code right now. We think that, with moving forward, a lot of the standards that make this place great, and you do get very good development in Zionsville. We can make it so that the code is clearer, and we hold through those design values that I think result in the high quality development that most of the people in the town we spoke to is interested in seeing here. A good code fosters predictable results and a high quality public realm. And we're looking for physical form to be the organizing principle for the code. So we still will regulate uses. We still will think about what types of uses are better in what districts, and make sure that people are protected from uses that might inhibit or affect their lives. But we also want to think about the form that those types of uses take place, and really think about the design and character of the town moving forward. So actually, I pulled this from the draft conservation district that Councilman Colt mentioned. The purpose of that district, as expressed by the residents that prepared it, I think that this is a really good purpose statement: to encourage and support new construction that is compatible with Zionsville's unique historic and architectural character, support and encourage preservation, maintenance, rehabilitation of historic structures, and the construction of new structures in a manner that complements and reflects the history and character of Zionsville. That type of purpose, I think, aligns very well with the type of purpose and the rules of Zionsville's zoning code and what we're trying to achieve in the zoning code update. But I think it's important to also note that historic districts or a conservation district and zoning overlap in what the types of things that they can cover and provide guidance. But a historic district is not an overlay district. It's actually not zoning. It is a different type of code with a different purpose. Those purposes can align. And I think luckily we might be working on both now. So we have the ability to make sure that they align. So historic districts with zoning together have the ability to preserve areas, but also preserve the significant contributing resources that make those areas qualify for and be worthy of historic preservation. I wanted to talk a little bit about the what we mean when we talk about consolidating district, or when I said we hope to eliminate redundancies in the Zionsville code. One of the things in looking at the code is there are over 40 zoning districts in Zionsville. And many of those districts do the same thing. Many of them regulate the same size parcel, permit very similar uses with very little distinction between them. This map I put in this presentation to kind of illustrate that concept a little bit. I didn't talk about this last week, but this is a map and an analysis we did for the city of Livonia, Michigan, and their zoning ordinances actually just came into effect, and their new zoning ordinance, the mayor's signing it next week. But you see here in red, this is actually, or on the left, was the existing ordinance when we started that process. And when you talk about consolidation, I think that the overarching place to start is that most of the places in a town actually conform to the zoning district, that most of the town is in conformance with the lot size, the structure size, the footprint. And when you analyze it, you actually think over time, it's not uncommon to find that they are not. Many structures are not in conformance with the zoning standards. And I'm not going to spend too much time explaining why that happened, but tonight. But what I will say is when you think about the purpose of this district, the purpose of the codes, and you combine them, what we can do is bring a lot more properties into conformance with that base zoning district. And I think that will be our intent for the village, is to try to understand what the actual form of the parcels are. We're looking at all the historic plats. We're looking at the zoning ordinances and how they've changed over time, understanding that there was a purpose each time those ordinances were changed. But now we want to understand the purpose now, today, and what the town wants to achieve by today's ordinance. And I think in combination, looking at those dimensional standards, we'll be able to bring a lot more of the property in conformance with the current code, which will allow the path forward with both zoning standards and a historic or conservation district to be more easily aligned and more easily achieved through the normal development processes and procedures. In Livonia, we were able to simply consolidate 23 districts to 15. But in just making those 15 districts, we reduced non-conforming lots by over 250%. So in the final, we had less than 4,000 or around 4,000 non-conforming lots. And in doing so, we were able to also then address the purpose of the districts and what type of units could be built or even remodeled or expanded within those districts. Last week, I talked a lot about the tools to get there, and particularly about form-based tools. So architectural standards can certainly be implemented with historic districts, also with zoning. And one of the tools we use in a form-based code is this concept of building types. So what we do is we actually, rather than saying, here's your setback requirement, here's your height requirement, and here's the uses you can put on this site. What we actually do is we define building types. So these types of buildings are permissible on this site, and these types of uses you can do in each of these buildings. That allows us to be more specific with the types of architectural standards that can go for each individual type of building. And the good thing about how we do this is that the precedents for those architectural standards are derived from the local buildings, the best places in town. And last week, we were able to work with SHREP participants to learn about what some of those places were. What are those prize landmarks in town? And we, my colleague Mike, who I mentioned, my architect colleague, actually went out with a measuring tape and started to measure the precedents on what those buildings were. So we could define building standards that would accurately reflect the best places that the village wanted to replicate. And some of those uses, I'm showing here, this is a carriage house. So this might be also sometimes called a granny flat or an accessory dwelling unit. But this is typically an outbuilding. Most of these uses, I'm going to show a few more, but these I would describe as multifamily uses. They are sometimes implemented in residential districts. I'm sure many of you know about a carriage house or two in this area. The idea behind this is that most of these types of uses in a single family district would require some level of approval, be it a planning commission approval, site plan approval. This is not a typical single family residential type development. Zoning codes often exempt single family residential from this type of approval process. So the value in creating building standards, this would be a duplex, stacked duplex. And these are not proposed for Zionsville, I should say. These are examples that we've used in other codes that we're going to work to refine, as well as select building types for this community. Another example of a side-by-side duplex. By using building types, we can actually code not only the architectural character of individual buildings by building types, but we can also code the places where these could be permitted. For instance, only on an arterial road or only on the corners. There are ways to space these types of units as infill development in areas. Another, I think this is kind of the king of all building types. This is the mixed use building. And I should also say, only in commercial districts. That's another way to use a building type, is to integrate residential into commercial districts, which we found to be very successful in a number of communities. But this is the mixed use building type. So retail on the first floor, apartments or office above. This is what most people think about when they think about a historic village in the Midwest. But there's other types of building types that also add to that character, like banks or theaters. And then there's the single family. So I think the reason we haven't started working on a single family building type, and I don't know if we'll need one in the Zionsville code, but I think it's important to point out that most single family residences, as I said, are not subject to a site plan process. So for instance, in the Sioux or in other places where we've done this, a single family building type is really designed if someone were to build more than one unit, say as a platted area. These codes would help in like a pattern book to define what types of units could go where in new development. And I think that's where really a conservation district or a historic district could take over from the zoning code. In a sense, it will help you work on residential properties, residential standards, and ensure that the character is protected, is what we've heard, in a manner that is easier to implement, so that you're not going to the Planning Commission for residential issues. So you're not going to the ZBA for residential issues, that you have an administrative procedure and a board that's designed to think about these types of issues that are really not about commercial development, site plan development, or those types of procedures, standards that really are aligned with residential improvements, like me putting the door on my house. That's not something that you go to Planning Commission for. But having little guidance through a historic district, then the character of the district can be ensured, and you can, figure out how to find the best door. So everything I kind of spoken through here about where we're going with that ordinance, we talked about it a lot last week. And specifically, one of the things we are working to do is implement what we heard from residents. And so I wanted to provide a little results. I wanted to share with people tonight what we heard. So here's some bullets on that. New development should match, and this was specific to the village, new development should match the existing character. Variance standards should be developed and enforced. I skipped over the height limit. Height should be 2 to 4 stories. We talked a little bit about how building codes could be used to create some variety, but generally enforce a 2-story limit. Blending housing types. So I presented some building types for duplexes, accessory dwelling units, or carriage homes. These building types help to integrate more types of housing into a community. And we heard very strongly that that was something that residents who participated last week were interested in seeing. Addressing emerging uses, short-term rentals is something that we discussed at some length. Understanding the balance between having a realistic parking standards and addressing economic development concerns. Making sure that new development was also tied to sidewalk ordinance. I don't remember the exact year, but we pulled up, I think, one of the first sidewalk ordinances in the village. This is often one of the first regulations you see in historic areas, was just to put a sidewalk in. Addressing stormwater concerns.
Real quick, I just want to chime in. Don't mean to be, but this is what you're talking about is your separate meetings from last week. These are different folks that were communicating to you with no anything from Indiana Landmarks or us. I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Correct. And sometimes I go quickly. So as I mentioned, we were here last week working predominantly on the zoning code. We did hear a lot about the conservation district, and we talked about it a lot last week. But this feedback is not specifically about the conservation district. It is generally about issues in the village and issues that our residents told us they would like us to address with the zoning code.
Perfect.
Thank you. Standards. So one of the things we talked about is making sure that the standards for lot coverage and those types of things are not out of scale with the village, but also allowed for what today's family needs. So that new development shouldn't just be as big as it could be, but encourage a variation of the inventory housing sizes as part of what makes Zionsville unique. And I put together this table today to kind of summarize some of those issues and how a historic district could work with the zoning ordinance to achieve ultimately the outcome that we hear residents wanting to achieve. So zoning, yes, zoning can regulate building design and height. Historic districts can also help to regulate that, so they can work together. Lot coverage is generally something we regulate through zoning. So when we talk about massing, scale of development, that's something more we would control with the zoning ordinance than historic district. Additionally, uses, what types of uses and what the impacts of those uses would be. That's something that we would generally more control through zoning than with a historic district. Residential renovations. So this is important, that usually those types of things are exempt from a site plan process. There are building codes, there are standards that can be enforced through zoning administration, code enforcement. Obviously, zoning codes do affect residential districts, but not to the extent that a historic district or historic district commission would look at new residential construction or residential renovation.
Yeah, there's a difference. Yeah, so keep going.
Yeah.
No, I just want to make sure
yes,
that's
residential
different.
reservation. New residential construction certainly can be more controlled with zoning, but again, not as much for an individual property. It doesn't go to planning commission typically. However, new commercial does. So we talk about historic character and preserving historic character of all the commercial areas. That's where zoning, I think, can do a really good job. Of course, your historic district does preserve those resources as well. And then I think one of the really unique things that a historic district can help with that really is not something that zoning districts do is, prevent and protect the historic resources that contribute to what making a historic district a desirable tool. So I'm going to wrap here with the code. And as I mentioned, we talked about that charrette, which took place last week. That was a lot of public feedback taken. And right now we're in the process of drafting the code. So we'll be working with town administration on following up on what we learned last week and starting the process of drafting the code over the next several months. So that's me, and I'm going to turn it over to Mark from Indiana Landmarks to discuss conservation districts and historic districts.
Okay, just FYI, there are chairs upstairs if you want to go, and Ralph Stacy's got a nice little chair next to him if you want to come sit next to Ralph. And Mr. Meeks has a seat next to him if you'd like to sit next to him. So otherwise, there are chairs upstairs. So thank you, Mark.
I'm going to stand. The advantage of going upstairs is that you could take a nap and nobody else would know, right? Whereas here, you're like right up there. Paul and I didn't really coordinate our presentations that much, but I did enjoy his anecdote about his door, because what I think it showed is how historic preservation commissions and their staff can be a real resource to property owners within designated areas. And you mentioned Ms. Ferraro, right, and her back and forth. And I think that kind of assistance and how they work with the community, with neighbors and particular potential districts is really helpful, and something that I hope you all will find going forward that can be sort of work hand in hand with the goals that you hope to achieve. One thing I hope that we leave tonight with is a clarification of what a historic district is versus what a conservation district is, because I think all of you have probably heard these terms knocked around over the past couple of years. I first of all, though, want to start off by acknowledging the work of some people that Councilman Colt mentioned earlier, but there's been quite a bit of work over the past 2.5 years already on the idea of a district of some kind with an ordinance being put in place here in Zionsville. And that has been, I've been in some of those meetings. My colleague Josh Biggs has been in some of those meetings. It's a lot of work on the part of volunteers, and I just want to make sure they know that their work is appreciated, and I think that in some ways, I've said this already, and I'll say it here publicly, that the survey that was done of residents of the village to sort of gauge their support or not for the idea of a district of some kind there is a model for us statewide. I think it was very well done, and good questions were asked and posed and answered by the residents, honestly, and it showed a high degree of support for a district of some kind here in Zionsville. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here tonight. I wouldn't spend my time. I don't think you would have spent your past 2+ years, looking into whether or not this was something good for the community. So unless there was that support. So starting off with the slide that was on the screen, some of you may not know who Indiana Landmarks is. So I just want to very quickly give you a 2-second thumbnail sketch. We are the statewide historic preservation organization. We are a private foundation. We are not the state of Indiana. We were founded in 1960 by Eli Lilly and a group of other Hoosier businessmen who felt that preserving the state's heritage is important. I still believe that today after a 30+ year career in the field and working for Indiana Landmarks for that period of time. So I think that, we want to be here to be, consultant, if you will, to the community, to sort of figure out a path forward, to answer questions, to determine, is this right for us here? If ultimately you decide this isn't the path we want to take, that's okay, that's your call. That's why we're here tonight. But hopefully we can answer questions to make everybody comfortable with the process. I started off my career at Indiana Landmarks working, staffing 3 historic preservation commissions in Huntington, Indiana, LaPorte, Indiana, Napanee, Indiana. So I know how they function and how they function in smaller communities, and would be, again, more than happy to work with you all as you walk this through the process. So I have heard many, many times over the years about what a quaint town Zionsville is. Oh, we love to go there to shop, and we love there to go to their restaurants and in their downtown area. As Paul was showing some of the zoning, I think the mixed use example, I look back at this example of image from, probably 1920 or something of that sort. And you have that same first floor retail use with the upper story housing or office type of function that is still ideal for zoning and land use in the 21st century. It brings people together in that downtown area. I realize that's not been a primary function of your work in a downtown over the past couple of years, but it should be at some point, because your downtown is charming and I think has great potential for the topic that we're talking about tonight. I also love the public transit component of that image. I don't think we can bring the interurban back anytime soon, but I do like that. So just taking a step back a little bit and explaining how we get to the idea of an ordinance. So in 1978, the Indiana General Assembly passed legislation that we call the state enabling legislation that allows communities across the state to put historic preservation commissions in place. They can create their own ordinance, put that through the process that we're talking through right now. If it's approved by the town or city council, then a commission is appointed by your town officials. So that's how it all got started. Now in Indiana, there were a few communities that kind of got ahead of the curve, got the state to General Assembly to approve their creation of commissions first. Indianapolis was formed in 1967. So the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission has been around for beyond 50 years. Evansville and South Bend both were formed prior to the state enabling legislation. And so was, for those of you who may know, the Meridian Street corridor between about 40th Street and the canal in Indianapolis, those beautiful larger homes. That area was created by state enabling legislation as well in 1974. So there are communities that have been out there doing what we're talking about doing tonight for a long time. As a matter of fact, in Indiana, in total, 52 communities have already passed preservation ordinances and had commissions in place for in some cases, decades. So what is the role of the commission? What can the commission do? What is it there for? So there's a kind of number of things that once the ordinance is passed, as we talked about, the commission is seated or appointed. That's usually somewhere between 3 and 9 members. It's whatever your ordinance determines. Many of the communities we work with, 7 seems like to be a good number for the size of the community. Those people are intentionally appointed because they have expertise in the fields of historic preservation, architecture, construction, land use, real estate development, just the kinds of expertise that when applications are heard on a regular basis, that they will be well positioned to review and approve or deny, and if deny, have a basis for that when applications for COAs are made. So what things are significant? I'm not going to necessarily read through all of these, but that are the purpose of the Historic Preservation Commission. Of course, the preservation of historic resources in the community are very important. That's, I think, a key, whether that's done again through a conservation district or historic district, which I'll talk about in a minute, that the preservation of the resources that we have are most important. But, you know, historic districts are ever changing. They aren't frozen in time. And so maybe there's a natural disaster, maybe there's a house fire, maybe something happens that buildings go away and new structures will need to come into a neighborhood. Maybe developers propose projects that need to fit within the context of an area. So that's part of the role of why a commission with the folks and a staff advise the commissioners on decisions that should be made relative to those applications. And hopefully in the end, we have things like great new development and design that comes as a result of those projects. So we talked about the 2 different kinds of potential districts that could be put in place that are allowed under the state enabling legislation and are recommended under our model ordinance that we put in front of councils around the state. The model ordinance says that the council can either put in place, with the recommendation of the Preservation Commission, a locally designated historic district or what's called a phased historic district. And the phased historic district is what colloquially gets called the conservation district by quite a few people. So the local historic district, the difference is that it is more, it has a little bit more of a regulatory teeth to it, in the sense that it reviews new construction, demolition of a building, a relocation of a structure, as well as exterior changes that occur to a building within a district that has been designated, Or say you're going to build under the new construction concept, an accessory building to an existing structure, that would also be reviewed. So then under the phased district, if you want to move on to that one, or the conservation district. The reason, by the way, we call it the phased historic district is the way it was set up in the state enabling legislation, and then we have also mirrored that in the model ordinance, is that if a conservation district was put in place, it would be in place as such for 3 years. And as that third year ends, a vote can be taken within the district to see if they want to continue to be a conservation district, or it will automatically move to a historic district. Okay. So what is the difference is that a conservation district, properties within, there will be demolition review, infill construction review, as well as the moving of historic property, but changes to the exterior of any structure within those boundaries, that is not reviewed. Okay, so it's just those 3 items, not any change you would make to the exterior of the structure. So that last slide, just real quickly, if you could jump back. So in a conservation district, just some of the things that are going on. I mentioned that the demolition would be reviewed. I talked about those 3 things, but it is a step towards the encouragement of the preservation of the built environment in your community. I do want to sort of say one thing about what had been talked about previously and what I think folks have heard before in the ordinance that's been floated, and kind of where I'm at and suggesting is that by just passing an ordinance that creates the Preservation Commission, seats them, et cetera, identifies which areas of the community might be become a conservation or historic district, that means that the entire community of Zionsville, areas that are indeed potentially historic, could come in and say, hey, we'd like our property protected, or we'd like our neighborhood protected. Whereas I think what was being discussed before, whereas it was just the village. And so this gives, yes, the village could still come in for a designation, but it also means that other parts of the community have that potential as well. That's done under a separate ordinance, a designation ordinance. And those ordinances, there is time given to, educate, inform property owners as to what the designation would mean. And so that is something that hopefully as the council ponders and which direction to head here, that we will look at, because I think that will give not only the wonderful 2 years of work that's already been done, the ability to move something forward hopefully sooner in the village, but it will also open it up to other property owners in town that would like the designation as well. So just things that quickly the conservation district does not do. It's not going to increase anyone's property taxes. It's not going to make you open your home or restrict you from selling your property. I mean, I have heard it all through the years as to what things it makes people do. So just make sure to glance at the screen and know what this proposal doesn't do. And then finally, the certificate of appropriateness process. That is the document. Like now, if you go into City Hall for construction, or your contractor does, they get a building permit or a demolition permit. With this, there will be a step in between. So you'll go to the commission, you will present your project, what you're going to do. I'm going to tear down this building, or I'm going to, make some, if it's a full historic district, make a physical change to the property. And that then, first step, when you walk in the door, you can sit down with staff. They can help guide you as to kind of what has the best chance of getting approved when it goes to the commission. Then once you have that idea, you're going to put that into an application that gets put forward to the commission. There are some commissions that have the ability for staff to do that review and approval, but depending on, sort of on the lesser things, the minor things, so that they will move through more quickly. But generally, it will go to the commission. They'll review the application. Hopefully it will receive an approval and then move on, and you can start your construction project with your COA, certificate of appropriateness. And we just popped in here at the end, just a few quick examples. I think these are all from Indianapolis of some examples of infill construction. Those were all reviewed by the commission there, all approved and constructed, and you can see that they have sort of traditional forms, but yet are very modern and very contemporary in appearance and design. So, nobody's saying that somebody who wants to build a new structure in 2021 has to live without plumbing or make it look like it's from 1850. That's not what we're suggesting. It's you would still be able to move forward with those kinds of projects. There's just going to be a design review process in place to get the best results. Thank you.
All right. So there's a lot of information. I'm sure you guys are all still awake, which is nice. So kind of the next step, we want to do some questions. I know originally we want to focus on the village ordinance that's on the website. But I think what I'd like to stick to tonight, because we've received so many questions that both good and opposed and whatever, that's going to have to go in the frequently asked questions, because at the end of the day, we want to receive feedback from the residents on whether we should create a historical preservation commission to allow areas like the village to propose ordinances to create a conservation or historic district. I will listen to whatever you have to say, but I can't guarantee we're going to answer all the questions that have to do with the specific village ordinance, because that's going to have to be proposed. Like, we can't propose that to the town council. That has to come from a commission. That's part of the process, and that's what we've learned. And after working with McKenna, it makes absolute complete sense that we do that. So, and as a lot of you have asked in your frequently asked questions or emails that you've sent to us, is can some of this just be taken care of in the ordinance you're already working on? And the question to that is possible. And so why would we go ahead and try to get that thrown in there today? But as Mark also said, the group has put so much work in advance. The town has committed dollars to creating the architectural survey that a lot of you have seen, and it's been posted. That shouldn't take long once a commission is created for a proposal from that committee, so that the commission can propose that to the town, well, I guess the town council, and then the approval by the mayor. However, that can't be done by us tonight, but we will take all those questions, and I promise we will do. I'm not sure if I'll be on that on that commission or not. I'd love to apply for it just like everybody else, but I will tell you this: we will do the same thing we're doing tonight. We will allow everybody to have these opportunities to questions to ask and hear everyone out regarding an ordinance for whatever area in Zionsville. Because as we've gone through this process, the mayor and I've talked, there's been other areas that would like to look to do a conservation district as well. I'm not going into that tonight, but I'm just saying that's why we have to go down this process and not creating a specific commission just for the village. The ordinance, the commission needs to be represented the whole town. So the best way I'm going to do this tonight is I could answer all the 3,000 questions that have been sent to us. A lot of them were answered through the FAQs, but we would be here till 3 a.m. So please, as you come up, please give your name and your address. Ask a question. We'll do the best to answer it. And if we can't, we'll take the notes and we'll get back to you. That's the best I can give you because there's a lot of moving parts. So we'll start over here by Ralph, and anybody that wants to line up in the back and come up, please feel free to speak your mind and give us your questions or opposition of creating a commission or not.
Sally Zalonis, 40 South 3rd Street, Zionsville, obviously in the village. I'm definitely in favor of creating an ordinance to establish a historic preservation commission. One, because I live in a historic house in the village, but two, the sooner you can get that done, the sooner the village ordinance can go in front of that commission so it can go in effect, so that things that have been happening in the village won't continue to be happening to the dismay of village residents. And you alluded to the survey that was conducted in the village, and we know that overwhelmingly the people in the village have responded through that survey and have spoken in favor of some type of district to help keep the character of our village. So my question, I am in favor of it. I would suggest perhaps that you do a hand show to see people who are in favor of it. But my question to you is, how long will it take for the town council to pass an ordinance to establish a historic district?
I'll answer that, and I don't like to give a specific date on anything because then you're.
No, I understand. But
My goal, the mayor's administration and myself, our goal is to get a ordinance to the council before the end of the year for them to approve or not approve for a commission.
okay, thanks.
Hi, I'm Mike Zeller, 420 West Cedar. I also own another home in a historic district. I guess I've submitted a couple of questions, which I suppose we'll answer later somehow. But I appreciate all the work that everybody's done on this for 2 years, and the fact that the town is obviously spending some money on it. But nonetheless, I am not in favor of establishing another governmental entity that's going to control what's going on. I believe the things that are happening in the village today, that as my neighbors mentioned, that people aren't happy on, primarily are because of variances that are being approved regularly to get past the current either setback, height, or especially lot coverage rules that are in place. And I believe before we should enter into new commissions and new additional bureaucratic bodies, I believe we should first ask our bodies to enforce the current rules. I think that would go a long way to avoiding a lot of the problems that we see. As far as the character, I've got architect friends who sometimes use the word eclectic. That's what the character of the village is. It's a combination of, I looked this up, of different things. That's what the village is. And God forbid the time come when it would have to meet specific things, or we all have to put the same door on our house. That prospect just gives me the shivers. So anyway, I apologize to my neighbors who have put a lot of work into this, but I feel like the first step is to enforce the current rules that we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ann Wade. I'm at 110 North 8th Street, which I don't know if it's in the historic district or not. But I've been a resident of the village in a couple of different areas for a long time and love it dearly. And as my other friend just said, yes, I like it because it's very eclectic. So I'm not sure what, everybody has a different point of view. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And I think that the 3 houses that you put up were very interesting because they did show a modern take on it. And so I'm sort of confused about what the purpose of the conservation district is overall. I love having a walk in the village and seeing all of the variety that we have, whether it's a house from the 1950s that's a ranch and a bit mid-century modern, or if it's something that's older that is truly historic from the early stages of Zionsville. I think Zionsville is great because it's a growing community, a very vibrant, very family-friendly community that has a ton of investment that happens around it. I think that whether you have a flat roof on something that's more modern, or if you have a gabled roof on something that's more modern, if that's what comes over under certificate of appropriateness from somebody who's very subjective, it's just, I think, a constraint that I guess I don't see an issue with. If you're going to build something more modern, I'm not sure that it following under a certificate of appropriateness for the specific type of structure is probably going to make some of the residents who are already unhappy any more happy anyway. And so I just really point to it being a very vibrant community. And you said that it doesn't discourage new construction, but I guess I would question that and want to understand more about the projects that you've worked on before and how it encourages new construction. There is, again, a variety in Zionsville, and I think that new construction is part of what we have here. I think there have been some really cool, really neat structures that have been built that are outside of the kind of more historic form, but I think are a great addition to Zionsville. So I am kind of confused on why you think that it doesn't discourage new construction.
Yeah, should I address?
Absolutely.
I don't know that it discourages or encourages either way. I think that when property, you already have in the village, which is what I think we're talking about. By the way, I've heard the term historic district thrown around. You don't have a historic district. A locally designated historic district, a National Register historic district, you don't have any of that. So no more historic district term. But the eclectic qualities of what you all like about Zionsville, those are the same things that I like. I mean, it is a wonderful area. Otherwise, I don't think any of us would be here in the room tonight trying to encourage its preservation, rehabilitation, and new construction that can occur. But what my point was going to be that because it is such a the village is such a fairly dense area in terms of build out, that there's just not a lot of available property right now for new construction. And so when the pressure begins to be put onto an unprotected area to say, let's acquire those properties to tear them down to build new construction of some type, and that's when either you say, what are our community values here? Are we okay with those structures being torn down from 1850? Do we want to keep them? Or are we okay with them going away? And if they do go away, what's going to take their place? What should that look like? One thing I kind of didn't talk a lot about that I should mention is that anytime a district is developed, whether it's conservation district, historic district, you meaning the people that own property there, that live there, develop what's called a preservation plan. And that plan or guidelines help everyone kind of mutually understand what changes are what those neighbors want to see for that district. So what might be right for the village as one preservation plan should not be duplicated for Hunt Club Road, because that's an estate property area, horse farm, sort of developed area. It's very different from the village. So its preservation plan would look different. So I don't know if I answered your questions, but I do think that it is possible to both encourage infill construction. I know that in Indianapolis's historic districts, it happens all the time. It goes through a review process. It hasn't discouraged new development. And yet we're hopefully getting, like I said, a higher quality outcome.
My name's Brent Davis, 560 West Poplar. Eileen and I have lived in town permanently since '86, so we've seen the town change for the last 40 years. I, like Mike, think I'm opposed to the district because I believe we have, with tweaks, what needs to happen in the current zoning ordinance. My couple comments are that if demolition, or if this district had been in place 1870, and a demolition of existing homes from 1850 weren't allowed back then, you guys wouldn't have the beautiful four square on Main Street, nor the prairie style on Main Street, the bungalows on Cedar Street, etc. So if a home has outlived its usefulness in the lifestyle of people, then whoever that property owner is that comes in and wants to live in Zionsville and become part of our community should be allowed, sorry, Ralph, to rip it down and put up an appropriate size home that meets their needs, fits the ordinance, and goes on from there. The one question, I'm gonna be nosy, is how much did your door cost? Under 5 or over 5?
Under 5 or right about there. And I put 2 on, just so you know, there's one on the back too.
Well, Eileen and I are both architects. She didn't show because more than likely she's afraid I was going to embarrass her, because I am not PC, but thank you for
Thank
all
you.
the time and effort you guys have put into it, but I can't buy it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the presentations tonight. My name is Alex Lee, 80 North 3rd Street. I just have 2 or 3 comments, and I appreciate you taking my questions earlier. In terms of, you talked about zoning, and I'm not sure what your charge is here with the town, but we already have a planning and zoning commissioner / now it's the community economic development that's in charge of, should be in charge of zoning. So I'm not sure if you're charged or under the town to redo the zoning for us. And so I'd like to definitely follow that process too. So I'm very interested in that. My second comment was, Mark, you mentioned about the Preservation Committee doing a survey. And that survey was done, that was citizen ran, not through the town, and about a high degree of support for that survey. I was not in agreement with that survey. My wife wasn't either. We responded to that, and it was not identified that we were not red or green. So in my opinion, that survey is skewed. So, and also my opinion that the town should actually do a survey and resurvey the residents, and then let's see the results of that. So that's my suggestion, is on that survey. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Janine Michael. I'm at 165 North Maple. I just kind of jumped ahead and was digging into the draft, what you call it, your draft. Yeah, ordinance, I guess, for the Historic Preservation Commission. And one thing that jumped out at me was that it excluded the commercial properties. And so my question was, is there something else that covers those? And if not, that's the area that I felt was in danger. Whereas there's plenty of room for a few different eras of building, modern building, I think outside of that. But I think when it starts getting to change the downtown, the commercial area, I would find that to be really a travesty.
Well, I think that's the other ordinance that we were referring to, but I mean, I think that that's why we said that taking a step back from the village solely and looking at putting the commission in place and then letting them make recommendations to the council and work with neighbors and neighborhoods on which parts of the community should be looked at for a designation ordinance subsequent to down the road. If downtown property owners are interested in that and willing to work with the city in that role, I think that's certainly something that the commission could look at. But you know, I don't think anybody's going to try to force them into a designation that they're not comfortable with. So,
Well, it seems like they remarkably kept what they could while improving it. So I'm surprised they didn't have something that they either agreed upon themselves or was already in some zoning. So, yeah.
Well, I can answer that just a little bit. The group that's been working on this for forever, way before me, it has been very specific. This is only residential. Commercial would have to be covered by something completely different, and that's not our intent or what we were looking for that specific ordinance. But you could talk to the mayor's administration or whoever, or I don't know where you'd go next, but yeah, this is just residential.
And I have a comment on that I think might be helpful. I would definitely say in my presentation, I tried to make the distinction that we're at least highlight what zoning is really good at and what historic preservation districts are really good at, and that they work in tandem very well. I think that historic preservation districts are very good at residential preservation. They're also good at commercial, or can be. But with zoning, all of your commercial properties, they'll be subject to site plan review. So when we talk about creating a form-based code, even approval of demolition on a commercial property, that's going to go through your site planning process. So hope that helps.
Yeah.
And the other thing, just the gentleman before you mentioned following the zoning update process, I forgot to mention, we do have a website. It's zionsvilletowncode.com. And we'll take emails there and also post updates about the zoning ordinance process. My company, McKenna, we are a consulting firm. We work all around the Midwest, and we're working with the Zionsville team, Wayne's department. So the town is very involved. I would think about us as specialists. We're kind of like, what we do is plans and zoning, and we're here to kind of expand the capacity just for this one project.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much. My name is Paul Dreyer, 535 West Pine Street, resident for 26 years. I'm in my second home in the village. Both of them are century homes. Our current home is just turned 161 years old. So as you can imagine, this ordinance has a big impact on me. I'm also a pretty confused person right now. The people that have worked so hard on this ordinance, I've been behind them, very, very much so. I want to see us preserve the eclectic nature and get control over the zoning or the allowances for not following zoning ordinances. So I agree with that. What I vehemently do not agree with is creating the conservation district. First of all, who of us are going to be around 2 to 3 years from now to say, no, we don't want that historic district that'll demand doors on our house like this fellow had to do. I know you loved it. I would hate it.
It was an interesting process. I'll say that.
I bet it
I
was.
wanted to tell the story so that people understand that it's can be validating, and it's a part of self-selection, right?
Yeah.
So everyone I've heard is everyone loves the eclectic qualities of the district. I think that historic districts, as Mark mentioned, help with that too. So it's not just about the door, but I felt like that was an interesting way of explaining how historic districts relate to zoning. Does it make sense?
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. But to get to the point that Councilman Culp has asked us to create commission, I'm all for it. I love that idea. I think that I would hope, and it's my first question. I have two questions. First question is how can we balance the members of that commission? So right now, I would call myself neutral. I'd like to see control, but I don't want a conservation expert. I'm the kind of person you want in the middle, but we should have representation on both sides. So the first question is how do you establish the opportunity so both sides get to help model our future?
All right, so I'll do the big picture answer, and then I'll let Mark do
Sure.
the philosophical good way of doing it, I guess, the best way. But Julie and I talked about this the other day and how this process goes and with the mayor and Wayne. So the way this is written in most districts like this, when you create a commission, it's appointed by the mayor and approved by town council. So you're talking about 8 different people that are going to make sure that we don't have it one-sided or the other.
Okay.
Right. And it's originally when we wrote this, and I know they're confusing, you should be confused. And is that when we originally were recommending a commission just for the village, the recommendation was to at least have like 4 people from the village on it. But after we've gone through this, it makes complete sense that it needs to be a town. So that won't be just people that live in the district that is proposing an ordinance.
Okay. So you create some outside,
Yes.
maybe less.
Yeah, there'll be experts in more than just, I live here and I want this.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Very, very good. Okay. Second one is that looking for future developments that are happening here and regarding places where people are going to live. I've seen some of the information up about putting in very large apartment buildings right in the center of downtown. And that doesn't bode well for any kind of preservation or conservation. How is there an influence that this commission can work with, or does it all fall under the work that Paul here is doing?
So massing size of structures, we talked about that a lot last week. It is absolutely something that can be influenced by the zoning code.
Okay. All right, very good. That's good to know. And the last comment regarding the historic district, I got a flyer in the mail last week, and it said, "Come and hear about the historic district. Come and hear about the historic district." The one agreement that both sides of this argument have is we don't want a historic district, or the bulk of the people don't. So I ask that we all try and be careful not to call this a historic district. It's conservation, and it gets us to where we want to be, great, but historic district does scare the hell out of a lot of people, including myself.
I completely agree. And you know, words mean something.
Yeah.
Right. And so after working with the group up here, there may be a group that wants a historical district, not in the village, could be somewhere else. Right. And I think Mark did a fantastic job of saying the two of us have been working with this group for a long time. The proposed ordinance will be, I would hope would be to this commission for a conservation district with the 2-step process. And that way the group can come back up after 3 years and say, yeah, we want to stay a conservation district. Great. Okay. Everybody's happy with it.
Great.
Nobody
Thanks.
wants to force anybody with a
Yeah.
historic
No,
district if
and-
that's not what you
And
want. So.
per the statute, everyone, just so you know, we have to follow the wording, right? So historical conservation committee, preservation committee, historic preservation committee is what it should have said, right? Or commission, sorry, preservation commission. So historic preservation commission should have been what we were asking, but at the time we were proposing the ability to do that just in the village. But after we've met with everybody, that just doesn't make sense, especially when other areas may want to create their own. I have no idea how the commercial piece works or multifamily from that aspect. So that may have to be a different conversation down the road, because that's not what we have focused on and had no intent to ever put commercial in any of this, any of these ordinances that would protect homes in the village.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Nice
Thank
job.
you.
Thank you.
Mervyn Cohen, 520 West Cedar Street in the village. Firstly, thank you for organizing the meeting and the presentations. They're very informative. I think if you ask people to move into the town of Zionsville, why they do, you get 2 answers that are at the top of the list. One is the school district and the other is the quaint village. I believe that in this country, anybody's got a right to build whatever home that they can get approved and what they can afford and whatever size they want. I also believe that nobody has the right to have their dream home in an historic village. If they're going to move, if they desire to move into the historic old village district, they should recognize that there's some obligations that come with this. And if you want a 6,000 square foot home with 4 garages, there's plenty of subdivisions with property where you can move to. So I strongly support every effort that there is to preserve the character of our village in whatever way we can possibly do it. And I think all of us who move here have an obligation to support that. We've had a few comments that we don't need any new layers of regulation and that just the problems that we have of destruction of 100-year-old homes in excellent condition and the construction of several, for want of a better word, monstrosities in the village in the last few years is due to the zoning board being too lenient and approving when they didn't have to. The zoning board does not protect the village in any way, shape, or form. Any home 50 years, 100, 150 years old that any of you in the room own can be bulldozed tomorrow. There is nothing in the Zionsville regulations that can stop you. Also, any huge home that you want to build, as long as the lot is large enough and your height doesn't exceed the restrictions, it can be as big as you want if you have a moderate sized lot. It can be as ugly as you want. It can completely not fit into the village. So the zoning board, please, everyone realize, even if it was to fully implement what's in the zoning ordinances, there's nothing or very little to preserve the historic nature of the village. So please, we do need something different. Don't fall back on the zoning board as protection of the historic nature of our village. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. So that's something we've been working on and talking about between the 4 of us for a week now, is it would, the ordinance that's that McKenna Group's working on would never protect any historical home from being torn down. There's nothing that we could do to do that. So that is why we're working on putting something together to allow different areas that want to protect homes to create these ordinances and presented by what we're recommending as a commission.
Thank you. My name is Steve Betts. I'm building a home at 715 Hawthorne Street, and I tore down the home that was there previously. Before anybody sheds any tears, the home was actually marketed as a tear down. It was in deplorable condition. I thought about remodeling it, but once I toured the place, I was like, yeah, the seller's right. This place needs to be torn down. And the neighbors agreed. And, my wife and I have lived in Zionsville for 21 years. We've always wanted to live in the village. We agree, everyone feels passionately about, the charm and the character of the village. And, we want to build something nice, but of course, style is a subjective and, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And what I think is nice, you might not, But my wife and I have fairly contemporary tastes. We've hired a local, Zionsville architect to design something that's actually quite contemporary. And maybe people will love it, maybe people will not. But it'll, I think people will say "wow" when they walk by. And I think it's dangerous. First of all, I'm not in favor of creating this commission that would regulate all new construction, because I'm afraid of a group of people trying to regulate style and taste and what's appropriate and what's not. And, I think it's valuable. We should try to conserve the past, but every time somebody wants to add a second story to their house or build something new or build a barn or an out property or an in-laws quarters or whatever, it shouldn't have to conform to somebody else's, mythical conception of Mayberry or something that, that may not even be real. I mean, I think we have a very eclectic set of architectural standards, or not standards, architectural choices throughout the community. And I think that architecture is, let's say, architecture and style is a language that over the years reflects the current time and people's individual tastes, and it should be allowed to progress. Anyway, I guess I'll get to my question in a second. I don't think I would have bought the property had this commission existed, because in the prospect tearing this house down and buying the lot in the first place was a huge investment, but we wanted to build something contemporary and new, that wasn't necessarily going to look just like all the other houses on the street. And if this commission existed and we wouldn't even know whether we could get a building permit before going through, the fashion police that would, tell us, no, you has to look like this, and it can be no taller than that. And, then, we probably would just buy a lot elsewhere and build what we wanted, and maybe I'm the kind of people you want to stop. Maybe I'm the poster child for, the boogeyman, but, I guess.
Chief Spears will be parked outside your house for the rest of the evening.
right. But I guess my question is, have you taken a survey or asked your friends in the realtor communities, talk to realtors and ask them, well, have you asked them or done a survey about what's going to happen to property values? And, if I'm selling a property, will prospective buyers pay more, or will they pay less, knowing that their design ideas may or may not be approved, that they may not be able to build what they want to build? And if you're sitting on a relatively small 80-year-old house on Oak Street or something, and you're trying to sell it, and the only thing that can be built there is something that's similar to the homes around it, then that really limits the capacity. And so, I guess that's my question. Have you done a survey or talked to realtors about how this may affect property values and affect demand for existing lots in the village?
So I'm gonna let Mark answer that, because that's right up his alley.
Yeah, so I have not done a survey of realtors or in Zionsville or spoken specifically to that topic in the past. However, in the historic preservation movement statewide, that kind of question has come up many times in other communities. How is this going to affect, as I said, there are 52 of these commissions around the state. How is it going to affect us as property owners? And we have done surveys in studies in communities around the state. And in every case, it showed that property values in designated historic districts went up.
Okay.
And we only chose communities that had MLS data for 30 years to look at. So we could also compare it against districts in the same community that were just listed in the National Register of Historic Places, but had no local regulation like what we're talking about.
Okay.
And then a comparable neighborhood that had neither designation. So we compared all three.
Okay.
And in the locally designated district, it always went up more. You benefit as property owners. It's not harm to the property.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. I just fear, the regulatory scrutiny of the design police, and
it's a fair comment. I mean, if that's how you feel, that's perfectly fine. But just in terms of impacts on values, it's not, you're not going to see a negative impact.
Okay. Because I think that fear may project.
I have a couple comments on that one. May I make just a couple comments on that?
Sure.
One, I think you actually illustrated the true point of my door story. And that was that I moved into a historic district, and I too was afraid about what the design police would be. Now, my actual design sensibilities trend modern, even though I showed you a picture of a pretty old house. But the idea of a district being something that creates value that the people who move there self-select. Everyone who lives in the village here, you've already self-selected to live in a place that has real character. And whether it's through zoning, zoning does control what you can do, or if the zoning district is helped out by a historic commission or a conservation district, those standards will be in place. And ultimately, they're going to protect your property value. But I think the real thing I wanted to mention too is, and I think Mark could help me out with this because he showed some pretty interesting examples of new architecture in historic districts. But in building in a historic district, the purpose isn't to replicate necessarily some old design. The purpose is to build a contemporary design that reflects the values and needs of the current time. And that's really, I think, an important distinction to make, is that what we want to do in creating a conservation district would be to, one, provide some oversight in what that is, but also to make sure that new designs do complement that eclectic character. And so me, as someone who's looking to buy in a district, and why I didn't hesitate in buying in Kalamazoo in a historic district, is because I knew that place was designated as special, and that my effort to continue to make it special would be valued by the people who live in the neighborhood I live in. And I think that's kind of what the discussion here is about tonight. Whatever tool we choose to get there, we want to get there together.
I will say that I did like your realtor question, and I think, I took a note. Well, that should be a good thing to talk about moving forward. Thank you.
Mr. Betts, I want one other quick comment. I don't know who here might know what the first community in the United States was to have a historic preservation commission. Yes, sir.
Charleston, South Carolina.
Charleston, South Carolina. And I think if anybody who has been to Charleston, who knows the quality, the character that community evokes when you're there. And I don't know if you've ever looked up real estate prices in the Battery area of Charleston. You're talking 5 million and up. That is all a locally protected historic district. So, granted, that was since the 1930s. So they've had design review going on there for many decades, but almost 100 years. So.
Yep. Heather?
Hi there, I'm Heather Lusk. I live at 285 Hawthorne Street. And I will say, Steve, that realtors were asked. I spoke with 2 realtors and an architect, and they were in favor of the concept of this because, well, they felt that it would help home prices. They also, from an architectural perspective, feel that it helps them when designing something that fits the scale and scope of the neighborhood and not just let's maximize whatever we can on this area. I do have a clarification, I guess, Mark. You mentioned the 3-year thing, that it would automatically revert to a historic district. My understanding, though, over the last year and a half that I've been learning about this is that isn't necessarily part of it. Like the commission can decide to not include that. Is that correct? Or does that have to be in there?
Well, that's a good question. This is our model preservation ordinance, which is based on the state enabling legislation and how that reads for communities to adhere to. Now, Indiana's a home rule state. You can always tweak your ordinances a little bit, of course, to fit your community. So I'm not saying it has to be exactly like this, but I think I'm pretty certain that on the phased districts, the phases are a 3-year phase as a conservation district, using that term. And then as you approach the end of that 3rd year, the people who object to it, if there's no objection, then it can remain a conservation district and it continues on. Otherwise, it will automatically move up to being a fully reviewed historic district.
So if there's no objection, it would remain a conservation district?
Well, if there are people who
want it to be a historic district.
Right.
So it's kind of the opposite. So it could
right.
remain a conservation district.
It can.
It would, even in 3 years, like somebody said, if who's going to be around in 3 years to remember that. So it would just stay a conservation district.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's good.
I heard it the other way too a little bit. So
Okay,
I'm
good.
glad that was
So
clarified.
I think that, I mean, I know a lot of people had that concern, and I think that's, and in fact, I know I'm going to call you out on this, Alex, because I spoke with you guys personally about that thing. And I will say that in terms of the survey, you guys were on there as voting against it. And there were that if there's a red dot.
There's not a red dot, and that's why I'm upset.
Okay, I know, but I know you're.
Okay,
I know
okay,
you're in
hey, just let's.
I'm just
yeah,
trying to
let's stay with the
clarify.
speaker.
The survey was definitely accurate. I
If
saw.
someone wants to get in line, they can, but let's just
I
stick with
definitely,
the
I mean,
questions.
I looked at that very carefully. I wanted to make sure that the people that I had spoken with personally that were not in favor of it were listed there as being opposed. And I guarantee, the people that I spoke with were on there as being opposed, and it still was highly in favor. So in terms of the survey, I wanted to clarify that. One thing that I do feel that we need this is because I love the eclectic nature of the village too. All of these unique structures, the log cabins, the bungalows, the Gregory block houses, many of those have already been destroyed. And they're going to continue to be destroyed in place of homes that look very similar, that maximize lot coverage, that are the maximum height, that all might have unique characteristics, but overall overflow the lots. And we need these smaller homes. We need to have a variety and variation. And without this kind of district, that's what's going to happen, is we're going to be overrun with large brand new houses. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a quick comment as a follow-up on the sunset, or I would call it a sunset, but the idea in 3 years, there has to be an additional action to, if it's written up that way. I would say the process that's being proposed is to actually have a historic district in place. So, or a historic commission in place.
Yes, thank you.
So the historic commission will be here in 3 years, will be shepherding that decision. So however it gets written up, I wouldn't be afraid if you wanted to stay a conservation district. By setting up the historic commission first, I think they can shepherd that act if that's truly the intent.
I want to clear that up too, because that even more.
Did I say it right?
You did. However, the sunset rule was recommended by the town council, specifically Dr. Choi, which he was in here a minute ago, because it was based on the conservation district being the ordinance, not just the commission. So I want to make that clear. I don't know if you would put the sunset in a commission.
You should not.
Okay, that's what I thought. So the recommendation was originally, when this was being proposed, as a residential village conservation district. So I just want to make sure that's why
Which is fine.
which is fine. But, and we can keep that in there, but that's why that was originally done. Yes, sir.
Hi. Michael Sechrist, 300 West Oak Street, and wife Tracy, who hopefully I won't embarrass like the other person said that she didn't come. And I'm not good at doing this. I haven't been good at this since like high school, but I lived in Fishers for 30 years. Tracy and I moved here 2 years ago. Most of it was because of the people, the character, the village. You hear so many wonderful things about. And I think that is what we're trying to get done here and get accomplished, is that we actually have something to protect what people love about this place. If you ever outside your home and you see people walking by that aren't from here, you can overhear them saying, "Oh, wow, look at that house." And wherever that gentleman went, it might be that your big house is a wow, but that's in Carmel, that's in Fishers, and it's really getting built up in Westfield. If you guys want to differentiate yourselves between all those other towns and where we are, we've got to get something in place here. There's a reason why Indianapolis has 50 something or however many, 25, 30 in the whole town. There's a reason behind that. This isn't government control. This is just us wanting to protect what we have, especially the people that have lived here for 40 or 50 years. And I think there's a way we can always stay on top of things and make sure that there's checks and balances. There's a balance between the people that want things, more modern and things that are bigger, and the people that want things the way they are now. We can accomplish that, but I think we need to realize that this is something that's important that we need to get done sooner than later.
Thank you.
So sorry, no question.
Hi, my name is Kelly Sire. I live at 560 West Sycamore Street. I think my house is kind of unique in that when I moved back to Zionsville in 2012, I looked at a bunch of different houses. all around and outside of town, in town. And I picked my house and I knew it was smaller than I could buy out in Colony Woods or in the subdivision. So I felt like there was a trade-off when I was moving back to living in the village. So in my lot size, it was a rebuilt home. So they kept the footprint and rebuilt. So I do understand wanting a newer home in an older neighborhood. I have been negatively affected by, in my opinion, by development on my street. And my question surrounds more of like conservation of green space and trees, like the houses that were built across from me. Every tree was cut down, and it actually negatively affected the heat to the front of my house. The front of my house is hotter now because every large tree was cut to build 2 gigantic homes on a lot that originally had 1. So I don't feel like they fit in well with the other homes in my street, and we lost the entire yard that was there. So I saw you kind of whiz by the drainage and storage or storm drainage part of this. And, you know, there's another development, a large condo development or townhouse development going in at the end of 4th and Sycamore, and has drainage issues. You know, we're told we have drainage issues. We're told that, you know, we don't have sound infrastructure there, but our town keeps approving development that's not really dealing with that. So that's one of my main concerns, and I hope that something like this can help with that problem. I guess the other point that or the things that I've seen around town is that it's not the modern part or the changes in design, it's that I feel bad for the people that have these monstrous tall homes and their existing small home. And you know, from what I've experienced with my home is that it could change the shade or the sun or the temperature of their home. It could have physical effects on your home when you build these monster homes next to a smaller home. So I guess my question too is like, how does this help with storage and drainage, or how does it help with that part of infrastructure in the town?
We heard a lot about drainage. We actually took a walk in a rainstorm last week. So we got to see the water as it was going down the street. There's kind of two aspects to that. So one is the public processing of stormwater once it gets to the street. And that's really a systems issue. I think that it absolutely is affected by tree coverage. Plants and trees and specifically actually carry a lot of water during those events and slow the progression of that water, the first flush, as it goes out into the system. You know, there's also a separate issue, which is just draining from, you know, one residential property to another residential property. And that is something that, you know, my simple answer is you can't do that. You can't, you know, put a storm drain pipe and put it going on your neighbor's lot and be like, there, I covered my stormwater, right? So it's a complicated issue. It's related to massing. And I think that your comment on shade and the changing of the sun, those are things that we can control or think about through zoning. The comment that you made, though, about the preservation of tree canopy, and that you have to actually take down, you know, potentially landmark trees to do new construction. I'm sure that was on lots of people's minds when we were talking last week, but I don't actually remember that coming up. So thank you for making that comment, because I took a note. I mean, I think that's something else we have to think about in the zoning ordinance is, you know, whether or not we need rules. And Wayne, there may be rules for the protection of landmark trees, but that's something that we can look at as we look at the ordinance. So
I just want to quickly jump in on from a conservation or historic district standpoint. I think that landscaping is seen as a significant component of certain districts. There are others maybe not, but I think that would come down to the preservation plan that the neighbors adopt that would apply to that district. And if keeping mature trees is a component plugged into that or encouraged anyway, then that's certainly something that you could do. The one, a conservation district, historic district is not going to regulate shrubs or flowers or anything of that kind. So general yard landscaping is not subject to the ordinance. Yeah.
Thank you. And I just want to say I'm in favor of it, so.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Hi, my name is Stephen Mason Cup, and I live at 295 North Elm. And I really enjoyed the village. Been here for a little over 20 years. My wife went to high school here. I am embarrassing my wife by saying that. Just the time not going here. We absolutely love Zionsville. We decided to move to the village, and we bought a small house at 295 North Elm. And we had some really romantic notions about sort of gut rehabbing it and taking care of it. It's ultimately built on a fieldstone foundation. Water would just sort of pouring from the side, and there's a barn right next to it. Had romantic notions about the barn as well. And we're going to use the wood from the barn in all sorts of neat ways. But as it turned out, we couldn't even give the wood away. We went to everybody trying to give it away, and ultimately took down the barn, and ultimately had to take down the house, because when we figured out what we had to do in order to take care of it, we would have to trench a foundation all around it, and nothing would be left but the studs. We were vilified about 15 years ago through this whole process. It was hard. We had a number of people who really, sorry, I didn't think I'd get emotional about this. We had a number of people who really ended up sort of taking some things out on us. And the interesting thing is, and this is kind of the point I'm getting to, is we ultimately built. And Adam from your firm was walking around the village. And my wife and I walked past him. He was staring at our house, and he said that was one of his favorites in the entire village. My point is, tastes change, they evolve. I have a difficult time subjecting myself and my neighbors to, as was sort of described as sort of taste police, something is wildly subjective that we can't really determine. We've heard just a moment ago that really the issue is size. Size is something that's determined by zoning. We also we heard about large homes and small homes. Let's take a look at the village. We have small historic homes, or old, because we simply have a proxy right now called 50 years being historic, regardless of the quality of the home. But small homes next to large, older homes as well. It's a crazy quilt of a village. That's what we have. Putting additional bureaucratic layers of government over this, I don't understand it. A couple of questions were raised also about the economic impact. Mark, I think you addressed it. I think Steve brought it up. Heather spoke to it as well. I've had some different conversations with different realtors and architects. But rather than the anecdotal aspect of it, there's also a study by the Journal of Real Estate and Economics that did an analysis of all those historic studies. And they basically determined that there was no real impact one way or the other, or maybe even a slight negative impact if you took out some homogeneity bias and other biases. So from a pure statement that it's positive, that's not exactly what I saw. My question is really more of, we keep on throwing the word historic, and I love Zionsville. Zionsville and Charleston are very different towns, but I love Zionsville. But our proxy for historic right now is 50 years. That puts us at what, I don't do math, 1971 home. 71. I love 70s houses, but I think that we're pushing the bounds of what we're actually determining as historic. But let's more talk about historic from the context of everything that's old now was new once. And we're really sort of getting away from the ability for communities to evolve when we're really trying to do things from a taste perspective that we've already heard is really more about size. And size is determined by zoning. So that's one of my comments. Thanks.
I have a comment if I can make one. I would say number one, Mike, if anyone's heard the phrase, I love the future, my colleague Adam is actually watching the stream right now and he's texting me. And he did say, you know, he loves your house. And I've seen pictures too. I'm going to go by and look at it. But, you know, the question of scale and setbacks, those are things that we can determine and we can look at. But, you know, I've heard a lot tonight, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that people who go about trying to build a new house in a community, they do it with, you know, good intent. They want to create a place to live. You know, and I think, you know, the purpose that I talked about tools like the historic district, the conservation district, different zoning districts, right? Within a zoning ordinance. These are all ways for us to control and represent design values and ultimately make it so that, you know, people understand that there's clarity in what's permitted in their community. And I am hearing tonight that clarity, I think, is desired, whether you're for a conservation district, if you feel like we can accomplish the needs that the community wants through a zoning district. I think hearing about these issues, hearing about these experiences, from my perspective, it helps me to learn about what those design values are and then figure out what the best way to codify. I talk about coding it, like talk about coding a door, right? It's not necessarily that we want that door. For me, it's a process of understanding the materials and the values that go into those design choices. So my team and I, we do walk around communities and we do look for like what strikes us as being unique and having those types of design values. There's a building that we spent some time looking at on Main Street that is built maybe 5 feet taller than it should have been built. And but otherwise, it's a pretty amazing structure. And I'm not just here to say that you know, we shouldn't code it to be 5 foot shorter. I think maybe we should. But I am here to say that you can recognize a certain quality in something that's done well. And you know, many of the things that we recognize, I talked a little bit in my presentation, how you would assume that many of the things that existed from 50 years ago conform to the zoning. Some of it doesn't, right? So that's what I do in my analysis. I try to sort out what I hear people say about their values and then make sure that those values are represented in the codes that control their communities.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chloe Qualls. I live at 635 West Pine Street. A picture of my house from 1890-ish was actually in Mark's presentation. Beyond that, I grew up at 560 West Pine Street. So I have lived on Pine Street for approximately 25 of my 32 years of life. And I don't want to see a change. So there's a question in here. I will say I am for a conservation district. But I would like to know if the town has a strategy for kind of combining the zoning ordinance and a conservation district or a conservation commission. I'm a little confused on that part. But you guys kind of teed up my question too, is that like, based on Paul's presentation, I think 90% of the grievances that our residents have can be fixed with zoning. And perhaps if we get our zoning ordinances in line or fixed or whatever you may call it, that might discourage people from buying lots and tearing down historic houses that are not protected by a conservation district just yet or ever. But I get, that's my question. Is there a strategy to align the zoning and a potential conservation district?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have all the answers today, but yes.
Well,
that's
I
why
know
the four of us are working together.
Well, you mentioned that you plan to put a commission together by the end of the year. Is that correct?
I would like to propose a commission by the end of the year for the council to vote on. but we obviously will have things to talk about after tonight's Q&A.
Okay, so does the commission handle the zoning as well?
No,
No. Is
Nope.
there a timeline on the zoning?
well, that would be that gentleman right there.
I think nine months to a year is reasonable to adoption. But yeah, I think you have to understand there's a fair amount of time in there for technical review and for the community to review drafts. So as I mentioned in my presentation, we are drafting the code. I would like to have at least the substantive recommendations for the draft code done before the end of the year. But there's, as you can tell, a lot of issues we have to sort through. So I'm happy with how the charrette went last week, and I know I have an engaged team that's ready to start writing. So
I quickly, I don't want to take issue with something that you said, but you said you thought that 90% of the issues would be addressed through tweak or changes to the zoning ordinance and code. And I guess maybe this is my question for Paul, but I thought I saw when you put the things up on the screen that how historic structures would be affected, that what you're working on wouldn't affect that, or
well, I guess
it was a no.
Well, yeah, I guess the key thing that is really important is that, tearing down contributing historic resources, that's not something the zoning code will protect. Right.
So I just wanted to clarify.
So
yes, and that is actually, I wrote it down in my phone because that is very specific to why we would want or need a conservation district. But as many people said here tonight, styles and opinions on what is pretty or not pretty differ. But I do feel strongly that zoning would cover size issues. I don't want a 4-story house being built next to my small 2-story bungalow, which is not what I live in, but you get the point. And I think that coding for zoning would help that issue before we ever had to take the next step to a conservation district.
So let me ask you this. Are you saying that, well, let me throw this a different way. So are you against a commission who can work with the new zoning to potentially let other people in districts propose a conservation or historic district?
I am for a commission.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Next person.
All right.
Next person.
Hello, I'm Kate Keppen. I live at 285 North Main Street. I was live streaming this and actually was so concerned, had to come down and ask a few questions. So I live in a really cute little tiny bungalow. It's probably 1,300 square feet on a good day when it's hot and it expands. Had one bathroom when I bought it. We renovated the entire thing from top to bottom. Labor of love, literally sitting there with a bottle of wine, scrubbing floors and pulling out nails because there were 4 layers of linoleum on hardwood. I don't know why. Raised all 3 kids in this house. They're all Zionsville students. My oldest just graduated. I have one still in Eagle Elementary. Love my home. That being said, I would never again do what I've done for this stupid house. Okay. The yellow house that was torn down on Main Street, if you guys did not have the opportunity to go in there, should have been torn down. The ceiling was being held with contact paper. I could not stand in some of the rooms on the 2nd floor, and I am 5'4", you guys. I mean, that house, although it might have been cool and it had loads of character, was not functional to live in. My house has loads of character. It is not always functional to raise 3 kids in it. And I went and got a dog. So, I mean, I get it. They're charming, they're adorable, but my main concern, the reason I came down here, my question for you, every time that I renovated something in my house, it cost more money, it took more time, and nothing was to code because it was built in the 40s. How are you going to guarantee me that people like me, the single mothers, are not going to be priced out of our market? It's going to cost $12,000 for me to replace 13 windows on this house. And that's cheap vinyl that I don't even want to do. I can't afford to replace these windows. How are you going to protect these people that live in these homes when you put this really great thing on paper and the people that live there can't afford to live there anymore? What do we do? I'm very concerned about that. I appreciate protection. I appreciate character, but I won't be able to afford living in my town that I love. And that really concerns me.
I think that's a really great point. And, for all my comments, I think to Mr. Betts earlier about great, it's not going to harm value. At the same time, the balance to that is, getting too out of whack for people like yourself that you're expressing a concern. I know that one thing that we have been able to do in some other communities is work with the administrations in those places to put funds aside for facade grant programs for property owners in historic districts or properties that are designated individually. So if indeed the area that you live in were designated and the council saw fit to create a facade grant program that the commission administered, which we do in other communities, you could apply for a grant to make some of those improvements to the property. Now, I'm not saying that they want to do that. I can't speak on their behalf, but I'm just saying such things have been put in other places so that it's not just the stick, but it's a carrot and stick kind of approach that it helps folks like yourself that need those kinds of resources to stay put.
By the way, that was an amazing question.
Yeah, it was a good
I've not
question.
heard that from anybody.
That's my biggest concern. I
So,
love my house.
thank you. I mean,
We
we're
walk to
listening.
3
That's why we're
parks.
here.
We can go up to the schools. My kids
Yep.
can walk to the library. I don't want to move. I want to stay there till they're all out of school. Then maybe I'll escape Indiana, but I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for coming all the way down.
That was awesome. Thank you. Duly noted.
Can I ask a follow-up? Because I think that was a good question that related to something.
You're not going to talk about your door again, are
I'm
you?
not going to talk about the door,
Okay, thanks.
but I'm going to talk about another house that I lived in. Actually, when I lived in Broad Ripple, I lived in a one-story bungalow, one of these kind of 60s mid-modern bungalow houses. And I love those houses. I actually bought one. I used to live in the city of Ypsilanti, and I lived in mid-century modern, 1150 square feet, single story, mid-century modern, had vinyl windows, and as we kind of cross over that threshold for 50 years, these houses are becoming in kind of that realm where we want to protect, right? I'm hearing people in the community saying we want to protect smaller homes. I'm looking at Mark because I'm wondering, has this come up in other districts in Indiana, the idea of what is appropriate for remodeling like a 60s mid-modern house in one of these districts?
Yes, and I think people have different personal tastes as terms of, oh, I like a 100-year-old house, but I don't like something from 1960 or 1970. But I will tell you, being an observer of the real estate market, that is the hottest, price or date range going is from, post-World War II housing is crazy right now in terms of what you can get in terms of return for sale. So, whether or not it's something that people appreciate, I don't know, because I think that's we were saying earlier, somewhat a subjective thing in terms of style. I live personally in a 1956 mid-century modern, and I love it, and it's a great, asset, I think, single-story living, but it's not for everybody. Somebody else likes their big 2-story home, that's fine. So I think it all comes down to when we do designation and protect areas. I think that goes back to the point somebody made earlier about eclectic qualities of the neighborhood, that it's great to have the homes of those eras as well as appreciating something from 100 years earlier.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Simmons. I don't live in the village. I live in Cedar Bend. I've been remodeling in Zionsville since the 80s. I've probably worked on at least half of his house in the village. We did a brick ranch at, I can't remember Kramer's exact address, but the Kramers live on the corner of 4th and whatever that other tree street is. And it was a little brick ranch, and now it's a 2-story Victorian with a pitched roof, a porch all the way down the side. It's beautiful. It's very in keeping with the village. And I have done so many homes and big renovations in the village, and nobody has ever said, I want to tear this down and put this big modern looking house up. Everybody has wanted to keep the style of the village. It's never come up. If it did, they'd have had to find another builder. That said, I hate regulation. I hate it. Wayne knows. I hate it. I don't want any of it. But I think what you guys, some of you are missing is what's truly permitted. And what's permitted is I can go to the village, and if this is what the customer wants, I can take that one-story house with the high-pitched roof and the gingerbread on it, and I can rip the whole roof off, and I can put a box on top with wood siding, plywood siding all the way around, vinyl windows, 412 pitch on top of that old house, and that's permitted. That's acceptable according to the standards right now. We're talking about the storm door. That's a great example. I cannot hardly tell somebody that their storm door costs $5,000 to replace, like his did. But right now,
500.
500, not 5,000.
Can we not talk about the door anymore tonight? The door's off limits.
If we have to make it, it could cost $5,000. But right now, I can get a $50 aluminum storm door with the cross thing on it, and I can put it. Her house is a good example. Everybody loves the copper on her house and that look. I can put it on the front of an oak, beautiful door, a white, ugly aluminum storm door. There's nothing to stop that right now. So I think what y'all have to keep in mind, and it's not really being said here, because we're all thinking that we want to build this big monster and this big monster, and we have the money to do this, we have the money to do that, is the fact that there's nothing to stop, that trailer that sat at 4th and Ash could have just been replaced. They could have taken that out and put a new trailer back in its place. You have nothing to stop that. Because it would be upkeep. It would be considered upkeep.
It would.
But at any rate, you have nothing to stop the really crappy stuff, and that's my point. And I don't want the regulation, and I'm not here to say do it or don't do it. I'm just making sure you all know what this protects. It's protecting some real crap that I could go do if I wanted to. And you need to keep those little details in mind.
Are you opposed to a commission or not? After that whole circle?
Even though I'm pretty outspoken on my political feelings, I'm not really one way or another. I just think people really need to have information both ways. And
yeah, absolutely. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Bowman, 190 South 6th Street. And I do have one question, and I wrote to you, but I thought I'd ask it again. And that's when I look at the map for the area that you're gonna have your conservation district for, are you gonna review the map again? Because a great big chunk of Elm Street was left out of that map.
My best answer for anything other than the commission is that'll have to be a separate conversation when the ordinance is proposed to the commission, if we all decide to have a commission. Because this could change. The feedback from tonight, your questions, emails we've gotten, this could change. And the group that brings this to the commission, if a commission is created, may see something different. And that's where you want to give your feedback in a Q&A session like that. Otherwise, we could speculate all day. I don't know what the answer is going to be.
Okay, and I thought this was a question, an information meeting, so.
Oh my gosh, you asked the right question. I just can't answer it right now.
Yeah, it's a perfectly fair question under the basis of, like I was talking about earlier, where what was being worked on was kind of a blended enabling ordinance and designation ordinance, right? We're going to both create a commission and designate the village. Now we're sort of saying, let's just do the creation of the commission, set aside the designation of any area of the community at this point. And at a later stage, as Joe was saying, we'll figure out
We'll
what
do the
that
same thing we're
map
doing
looks
right now.
like. So you'll have the opportunity to have input and say, but I want Elm Street included in that, or somebody else might say they don't. So it gives you all the opportunity to do
And
that.
just so you guys know, I'm all for the conservation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
I'll be quick because I know I've already had a turn.
I just wondered in presuming that it's true that we already have enough regulation and coding and zoning and all that. Could you speak to what the fail at 145 North Main came from?
I have no idea.
That's the house that,
No, I know the house.
Yeah,
I have no
okay.
idea how that.
I'm assuming you're getting to the fact that the home was allowed by the town of Zionsville to be demolished. And I think what everybody has touched on here is that the demolition, as the presentation by McKenna covered, demolition is not regulated by zoning in terms of a prohibition. It's your right. If the ordinance says you're allowed to demolish your home, no matter what the status is, if it's brand new and you want to demolish it tomorrow, you could pull a permit to do that
today
by right.
right, so that house was torn down and the variance did not pass.
The variance was withdrawn, correct?
Withdrawn, okay, yeah, we responded to it, and I guess a lot of other people did too, not in favor. But my concern is that there's been a lot that sat there for over a year on probably our most recognized street in the town. So is any of this going to address that for the future?
The conservation district, as long as it was a contributing or outstanding home, would have protected it from being demolished. The current
Okay.
zoning that's being proposed by McKenna would not do
Okay.
anything to preserve that home from being demolished.
So we need the conservation district minimally to
Correct.
to
I mean,
prevent that from happening again.
What it at least does is it puts in a process in place. So while your commission could review somebody's application for demolition, let's say that somebody's home had a bad fire and it's in bad condition and can't be repaired. They come and they say, we need to demolish the house. The commission approves it. And then they tear down the house and build something new there that will be reviewed and approved. So that's kind of how the process works. It doesn't mean, it can mean that the building would be protected and they would say, no, you can't tear it down. But that it's a review process.
Right, and that can be kind of subjective though, right? Whether it's suitable for demolition or not.
Well, that's somebody making the case in a public setting, standing right there before the commission and saying, here's why it should be.
Just like a variance kind of thing.
So I want to just speak a little bit for the group. We had this conversation, the group that is proposing a village conservation district, is that it was very clear from the front, if a house is deemed outstanding or contributing, but the cost of, I forget where she went about putting the vinyl windows in, but if the cost of keeping it to the lifestyle of having 3 or 4 children, presumably that group would have said, yes, we would give you the approval to tear that down because it's going to cost so much to fix it up to be to today's standards. It would make no sense. That's what this should work, right, Mark?
Yes. Yeah, there's a, we can get into it in greater depth, but there is a economic return.
Yes, that's the
number that is created that somebody can say, based on this, that I cannot earn an economic return on my property, that I should be allowed to tear the structure down. And that's part of their argument that they would bring forward in a presentation to demolish.
So you are for the commission?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Yeah, and the architectural value wouldn't really be something you could assign a number to.
No, but that is something that the commission will look at. Like Joe was saying, if it's an outstanding rated property, that means it's one of the best in that district. They're going to be pretty hesitant to allow it to be demolished.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Next.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Good evening. Wanted to first thank you, Councilman, for the work just the listening that you're doing. I think it's great. Wanted to share, Michael Marlowe at 140 North 4th Street. I was thinking like you. So I wanted to share our experience, how we ended up here, and have a couple questions and some thoughts. So we moved here from out of state about 5 years ago. Did not know that much about the area, and really the village spoke to us. We found a home we loved. And anybody who knows me knows this is out of character. We saw the house, jumped in the car with my wife, and I said, this is it. This is the one. And one of the reasons I said that was because I saw the possibilities that existed in the house, that we could add to it, that we can make changes that were consistent with the architectural integrity and historic or the style pieces that already existed. And, you know, one of the things that I think just so many people coming out here makes me think of is that we all want to be good neighbors. I think you know, the bottom line is we care about the village, we care about the community. We're coming from different viewpoints sometimes. Sometimes the vocabulary words get mixed up, but I do think everybody cares. And, you know, from our aspect and looking at it, I'm hearing a lot of binary, but I don't, you know, our experience wasn't binary. We were able to add, we were able to go through the process as it stands, as we experienced it in growing our home was very thorough. We hired an architect, we had a builder that was well known in the community. I went in a blizzard right before the pandemic and I got all my neighbors that could see what we were doing to sign a letter of approval. Didn't have to do that, but I thought that was a good neighborly thing to do. And, you know, had a lot of support on what we did and have yet to hear any negative comments on what we did in the house. And one of the things I think it's important that this conversation shouldn't be binary is people live in this square footage. You know, we have 4 young kids. I have a wife who volunteers in the school system. I'm a business owner. You know, we pay taxes, we follow the rules, we do the right things, we cut our grass. Just to say, move out of here, go to Carmel, that's what you lose. I mean, you know, sometimes you lose kids that go to the school and you lose people to volunteer. So I think that there's a middle ground to say, you know, why can't we just add some square footage in the appropriate properties, but with still maintaining the integrity of what's here. So I'm actually against the commission because my own experience was that we went through the process and we were able to add, and it was smooth. It was very difficult to get there. We had a lot of hoops to jump through, but it had a good impact. So that's my experience. You know, I plan on getting buried in the backyard, so you're going to have to deal with me for a lot of years, I hope. But I do something one of my neighbors said, Alex Lee, is that the survey, I didn't see the survey, so maybe I'm just didn't notice it, my bad, but I'd love to take it. Is there a way to take it? That's my first question.
I can't answer that because I didn't do the survey, but I will take that note and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Michael Morrow, right?
Yes.
Yep.
140 North 4th, big blue house. The other thing I've heard though too is, Mark, you made a comment that you're here in part because of the survey. You wouldn't be here because of it. I thought you said that.
No, what I said was I was impressed by the survey and I thought that it was a model for what other communities could look to doing in terms of how they communicate with the property owners in this case, the village area.
Is it fair that it's this foundational piece of research that this is based on?
Well, the important thing to understand is that what we're talking about tonight, the ordinance that creates the commission, is setting aside what was being done previously. Remember, I talked about the blended ordinance that would have created a commission and designated the village area as a conservation district. We now sort of said, let's separate those. That's probably how it should have been from the beginning. And let's just focus on the commission. Even once that ordinance is passed, it doesn't impact any specific property owner in the community at that point. It's through subsequent ordinances that you would designate
I think,
a particular area.
I don't think I was, I think maybe I didn't phrase my question correctly. The survey, let's put it this way. The survey sounds like a pretty important document that we're basing a lot of energy and focus on. And just speaking for myself, didn't know that, didn't participate in it, and would love the opportunity to participate. I've yet to meet a neighbor other than the Lees that did, and it doesn't sound like they were in favor of it. So, I mean, you know, but just speaking for myself, I would love the opportunity to participate in it. And one of the things with the language in the proposed, there are words like rhythm used and visually compatible with the predominant materials, visually compatible with the buildings. Just curious, can someone define rhythm for me? Like what's rhythm?
So rhythm tends to be how you look at say a streetscape and how buildings relate to one another as they kind of go down the streetscape. And so you tend to want to have a fairly similar pace of buildings down the street.
But
it doesn't mean that in the materials or the details that they all, or even height, that they all need to be exactly the same. Those issues are covered by other items in that list besides rhythm.
So that sounds like someone's viewpoint though, like an opinion. I guess that's my issue with it. It's because my rhythm might be different than your rhythm.
Maybe we shouldn't talk about rhythm.
I would use the term judgment.
Well, right, judgment, but more importantly, like you can be fined for not having good rhythm in your opinion. So I guess that's part of the point.
So let me, if I can,
Yeah,
from our
please.
model ordinance, which is what we're talking about tonight, read for everybody's benefit to your question. Number 4, rhythm of solids to voids in front facades. So that's if you're looking at the front of a house, where are the windows versus where is the solid on a building. The relationship of solids to voids in the front facade of a building must be visually compatible with buildings, squares, and places to which it is visually related. And then number 5 is the rhythm of spacing of buildings on the streets, which is what I was just referring to. The relationship of a building to the open space between it and adjoining buildings must be visually compatible with building squares and places to which it's visually related. And then the next item, number 6, the rhythm of entrances and porch projections. The relationship of entrances and porch projections of a building to sidewalks must be visually compatible, et cetera.
I have the same words.
Yeah.
Yep. So what is it?
I just read what it was.
No, I mean,
So,
I don't know the definition.
If I may step in here,
Sure.
I see what you're doing. And that's why, so everyone can have an opinion on design, right? But this, the language that's included in the ordinance is intended to help someone who's appointed to the historic commission exercise the judgment of their post. And people who work in the industry know how to use and apply these terms. So if you're against the idea of forming a commission, you might say, I don't trust the judgment of my elected
7 people,
officials.
yeah, or whatever, 3 to 7.
Well, no, I don't.
Sure, yeah, and that's fine if you don't.
No, but you're asserting something I'm not. I'm not saying I don't trust my elected officials. I'm just looking for a definition. So I like third-party data points. So if there's math around it, or if there's, comparable things, if there's rules around it, that we can, so that it's not up to someone's judgment if somebody has rhythm or not, that rhythm's defined as, you should be able to put, I think, something that other people can just relate to or understand instead of loosely guided, the committee will figure it out.
Well, I don't have a visual to be able to show you that would represent kind of what this is, but I'm going to try something very rudimentary. A house, the space in between a house, the space in between a house, that's the rhythm of the streetscape in a block of buildings, for example. So when you drive down the street and you look to the left or to the right and you see that rhythm of buildings as it moves down the street, that's what at least number 5 is referring to, the rhythm of buildings. So
Okay.
I'm not trying to slough off your question. I'm perfectly fine with anybody asking. I mean, there are, how many? 11 different items here that, as
Are all
Paul was
open
saying,
to
that-
interpretation, which is really my question, is can we get it to the point to where it's not so open to interpretation?
Yeah, that's when I talked earlier about a preservation plan for a designated area or property, or those are sometimes referred to as guidelines for how both the commission, commissioners that sit on the commission, as well as a property owner coming in for a COA, that everybody kind of has a more level playing field as to, okay, we're not going to consider these kinds of things, and we are going to consider those.
Yeah,
And-
which is exactly the concern you're answering. So that, when I went for a variance, there was math. There was, things to follow that weren't 100% up to interpretation. And so when I see 100% up to interpretation and some of the penalties that are pretty aggressive, that's a concerning thing. So, I would just urge whoever's making the decisions to try to add some closer definitions to what we're talking about. That would be super helpful.
I agree with you 100%. And that's why we're having these meetings, so that we can get these FAQs and get more explanation, so it's all consistent.
Yeah.
So I
Thanks.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I was never good at math. I'm sorry.
I personally like my rhythm, but
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Rudy Longman from 315 West Walnut Street.
Yes.
So it's my understanding, the creation of the commission itself, anything the commission does still ultimately has to be enacted in a new ordinance that's passed by the town council and the mayor, correct?
So that's actually, Brad texted me already about that during this meeting. That's 100% correct.
So what's the con of having the commission?
It has absolutely no leverage until an ordinance that is deemed for a district as conservation or historic.
And a commission is created by some kind of process to find people that have specific knowledge that will help make a determination.
According to the commission and the statute and the ordinance that we will propose, yes, it will.
Do you have, I mean, here in the town, do you have like an application process of somebody?
Yeah,
wants to
so
apply?
Julie and I talked about this the other day. All appointed positions they have to go through an application process. And the mayor and I talked, actually, were you in on that call? You were in on that call. Yeah, so there is an absolute process, and because the statute regulates it, the town council would also have to approve those. It's designated by the mayor, and it has to be approved by town council, the commissioners, in order to make sure that you have folks that either have the historical background, architectural background, the realtor background. All those things will be included, whether you decide, I think it's 3 to 7. Is that the total mark?
3 to 9.
3 to 9,
It's
thank
just
you.
where you decide you want
Yeah.
to land in this community.
So yeah, that's good questions, yes.
And I grew up in Fishers. After I went to school, I had a dream of living in Zionsville. Fortunately, my wife is from Zionsville, and we have our home here. Zionsville is an extremely unique community that is unparalleled in Indiana, really, but particularly in central Indiana. And there are plenty of places where you can build anything you want on any size lot, but I don't think that that's what Zionsville is. I don't think that's what the history is here. And this member of our household is certainly very pro-commission, but I will let my other half speak on her own.
Okay, thank you.
You said better half, right?
That was a smart statement.
Yeah.
My name's Katie Longman, and Rudy is my roommate and husband. So I grew up in Zionsville. I think Chloe and my first class was like 5th grade together. I did a Mr. Stacy's foreign exchange program in high school. I love this town. I always knew I was going to settle down here. And my concern above anything else has been demolition. I've never seen anything like it in the past few years, like I have my past decades here. And so with that, I think that the conservation district is pretty relaxed when it comes down to it. If you want to have a tie-dye house, I'm pretty sure you still can. You want to use vinyl windows and whatnot. So also very, very much in favor of the commission.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chad Bauman. I live at 260 West Cedar Street. I was also kicked out of extended family dinner early so that I could come speak on behalf of my in-laws who live at 200 North Maple. And together, my wife and I and my in-laws renovated and rent out a property at 210 North Maple. So by the time I've gotten up here, I've got nothing new to say. I'm just sort of repeating what other people said, and I apologize for that. But I'd like to go back to the points that have been made about what's special about Zionsville. Sitting on Cedar, we see a lot of foot traffic. My office overlooks the sidewalk. So daily as I'm working, I see dozens of people walking down the street. And when I go out and talk to those people, they tell me that they've intentionally parked up the street so they can walk down Cedar Street and eat at Rosie's, and they do it almost every day. So there's something not only about the things that we offer downtown, but also about village that surrounds it, the charm that surrounds us, that draws people to this town, that contributes, that contributes not only to the homeowners, but also to the businesses in town. And yeah, we have an eclectic style, but there are certain kinds of things that are not really, or hadn't until recently been part of that style. And I think if we keep seeing the demolition of smaller houses, the building of very plain sort of square houses that are not tied in very nicely to the architecture around them, we will get to a point when people might find it a little less attractive to come to Zionsville. We can't compete with Carmel on density of shops and pubs, or we can't even compete with Whitestown on that. But I can assure you that nobody's intentionally parking sort of far away from Brewburger and Carmel to walk through the area there to get to Brewburger. And I can guarantee you the same thing about Moontown in Whitestown. I'm parking as close as I can to Moontown when I have a drink there. And with regard to the zoning, as one lever here, I think, it's absolutely true. I would like to see our existing zoning laws enforced more aggressively, especially on lot coverage, as somebody whose lot sometimes floods, although not so much recently, thanks to work that the town has done on drainage. But that's related to oversized properties up the hill and less grass that can absorb water. And so it comes streaming downhill to those downhill properties. So yeah, I'd like to see greater enforcement of those existing zoning laws. But for all the reasons people have said here today, that's not enough. We need a both and approach. And then the third thing I'd like to say is I love the way that Merv put it. I think he's gone home to bed maybe already, but Merv, earlier talked about the fact that when you establish something like this, an historic preservation commission, and hopefully then a conservation district in a place like the village, you encourage the kinds of people who appreciate the existing charm of the space to move into that. We built, when we moved in 2012, when we moved into the village, we built a brand new garage. We hired an architect to try to build a garage that would match our existing home and the homes around us, just with a couple simple details. It wasn't much, but it tied it in and it made a difference. It made it look like something that belonged in the village. When we bought the house at 210 North Maple, it was advertised as a tear down, to go back to something somebody said earlier, but we bought it to prevent it from getting torn down, because we knew if it got torn down by a builder who was less scrupulous than Tom Simmons, who also improved my house before I moved into it, that space would have been, that house would have been house would have been torn down. It's a very small house. It requires $70,000 in foundation improvements. No builder would have invested in that. But we as homeowners in the area, wanting to preserve the look of the houses around our properties, were willing to make that investment. So if you have these kinds of conservation districts, you can encourage the kinds of people who really appreciate that charm, and you can preserve it, and you'll preserve the reasons that people come to Zionsville. Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't have a question.
That's fine.
Ralph, don't talk about the door.
No, I won't. I'll
Because I
talk
know you
about-
love Charleston, so
I'll
that.
talk about the pencil I wanted back was when I ran for Boone County Council a long time ago. I just wanted to reflect on a few things real quickly. I can remember in the 1950s, I was in my, I don't know, it was 8, 9, or 10 years old, but one of the greatest houses we had here in our community was the octagonal house up the corner of Ash and 4th Street. The 3-story, really good looking structure. We have nothing like that today. And Philander Anderson was a local banker. His family owned it. It's gone. I was a young man. I mean, I was 10, probably 11, but I always remember that. It always stuck with me. I remember when Mr. Lilly, you mentioned what a great person to think about what he did and helped to get going in the 1960s. I mean, it was tremendous. And that was back when Historic Landmarks of Indiana was what is Indiana Landmarks today. But I can also remember back in 1976 when we gave our first try to have some sort of preservation, protection, try to keep authenticity here in our community. That's when we had Reed Williamson, who came out himself, president.
I was not at that meeting.
Yeah,
1977.
I was there. I helped to set up the Main Street program that, you know, the roadshow, real neat roadshow that your organization had. We gave this a try. We tried, this is the fourth time. I hope we have some success. I didn't think I would possibly see that success in my lifetime, but I think possibly I will. I sure hope so. I've seen a lot of things, structures go in my 75 years of living at 60 South 2nd Street. And I've tried to be involved in things which I mentioned, protection, authenticity, preservation. All of you want to come out to Harvest Market at Maple Lawn Farmstead this Saturday from 9 to 3 and see what's going on there. That's been a hobby of my life is preservation. Everything from an 1832 cabin in Decatur County to commercial and residential structures here in our community. I think it's very important. We've lost a lot. If we don't do something, we're going to lose more, a lot more. And I would just like to, I'm in favor of the commission. There'll be some good things. There'll be some bad things. We're going to have to work together. We've had a lot of great comments tonight, but the time is here. We need to move ahead, and it's really tragic. I've gone to many public meetings in my lifetime, and when you have, I served on the Board of Zoning Appeals for almost 8 years, was president, Plan Commission for almost 8 years. I went to public meetings, and if you don't enforce what you got, you end up creating a lot of enemies because some people will stand up for what they think. And so I just wanted to see if you had anything to say about authenticity. I can remember going to the National Convention for Historic Preservation. I think it was down in Louisville, and the big push then, I don't remember what year it was, but was authenticity. You know, we still have some authenticity and we need to save it. But do any of you think that's an important thing? Because, you know, we've lost a hell of a lot. And I hope my son, who sat here beside me tonight, had to go home to his redheaded kids, but I used to have red hair just like him. But I would like to see preservation become more important than it has in my lifetime for my son and my grandkids. So that's enough. Do you have any comments about the authenticity? They really pushed it at that national convention. And, you know, Carmel, you know, what the hell's authentic over there? I don't know, but we've got something to save and we need to wake up and save it. I've seen this my entire life and I've tried to have some input into it, but we don't seem to ever get anywhere. So keep up the good work. I am on the committee again. And if there's another committee, I'll be on that too. Pardon?
Ma'am,
I'm sorry.
if you want to come up and speak, you can stand in line.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Next.
I do want to say I love that word authenticity, and it is discussed a lot in historic preservation. So I think, thank you for making that comment for sure.
Hi, Eric Lamb, 335 West Ash Street here in the village. You know, listening to everybody tonight, talking to my neighbors, the two themes that come up over and over again are we don't like the tear down of old homes. We don't like larger homes and what people want to see on property. And I mean, we all know both sides of that argument. I'm not here to regurgitate any of that. But the part I think that's really overlooked here is, as a homeowner, I bought my house in the village with ideas of what I might want to do to that someday. You look out the backyard, everybody has those dreams. And now, I'm being told I have to pay a fee, fill out forms, get special permission to do things that anyone else can do without begging for permission. And I mean, I know it's a draft. I know it's not final, but the draft ordinance, it provides that any member of the village can sue me for a violation without having any injury. If they win, I have to pay their attorney fees. They don't pay mine if I win. It's right there in the ordinance.
I thought you had a comment.
And that's based on the state. I mean, that's the state's standard form. I mean, that's not, special for us.
Yeah.
I don't know if we could change that or not. But it's making me as a homeowner a bad guy. I mean, I can't do the basic things without special permission, threat of being sued by anybody without injury. I can't change venue if I feel that Boone County is a biased county where, any other form of jurisdiction, you can move for a change of venue if you feel that you're biased. And then there's I think a cap of $2,500 a day for, a fine for violation. I mean, it's really making us homeowners a bad guy when I think the real issue here are the tear downs and the size. And I think the size can be addressed by zoning. So is there a way, the question I'm getting to is there a way to focus in on what people really care about rather than burdening every member of the village? And, and I say every member because it's if you're even not in a historic home, if you wanted to add a structure, whatever that means, that is dictated by this ordinance. So is there a way to kind of carve everything out and only focus on these things that people actually are upset about?
So there's a lot there that you talked about. So I want to start first with the enforcement piece. It is a $2,500 fine per day for a violation but that has to go through the court system. So it's not a commission member, it's not a town council member that's making that kind of decision. Normally, either the commission itself or the town attorney, in this case, would be the one that would enforce that. I am not aware, unless it's in this current draft of the ordinance that says other property owners within the village could sue you.
They're listed as interested parties. The mayor, there's an Indian historical organization can sue us, the council can sue us, any homeowners association, whether incorporated or unincorporated, they're all interested parties.
Okay, so is there though the ability, I was caught on that, like a resident of the village could sue.
Any occupant or owner, yeah. I was surprised too.
Yeah, I mean, that does surprise me, and I would say that might be something that as the Historic Preservation Commission ordinance is drafted, that kind of input is valuable, that we take a close look at who it is can be involved in a lawsuit or not.
And it actually mirrors the state code, which is what surprised me. It wasn't just kind of like an early drafting thing that I thought. So I was surprised it was also in the code.
So the intent of the $2,500, if I correct, the way I read this, is it's only for demolition.
Well, no, there's two parts. The top one's demolition. Right below it, it's for any other action that are in violation of the ordinance. And then it says, I can pull it up.
Yeah, that says $100, not $2,500 a day.
100 is between $100 and $2,500.
Yeah, but it's not $2,500 a day. I just want to make sure everybody understands that. You said $2,500 a day.
Yeah, that's what it says.
No, it does
Okay,
not.
well, let's go through
It says $2,500 in total. So just to make sure you understand that. It's only for demolition. It's only for demolition. So unless someone else in here reads that differently than me, but.
Isn't that assuming that you can get permission to do the work?
Right.
Yeah, you can't be sued for that.
Well, if
No.
I put a playground in my backyard, I didn't get a permit for that. I don't know if that's a structure or not. So, I mean, I can get sued for that. I mean, it's a legitimate concern. I mean, is a water fountain a structure? Is a new air? I mean, it's not a defined term.
So
if you go to, if you look on section 11.
Yep.
So section 11A2.
Yep.
Not less than $100 nor more than $22,500 in total for any other offense, meaning any offense besides demolition, which is
correct.
A1. Then below that, each day of the existence of any violation shall constitute a separate offense.
So you said that it mirrored what the state enabling legislation says?
This part doesn't. No, the interested party part does. I don't know if this says.
Yeah, it does not.
Okay, no, I don't
It
know.
says not
Okay.
less than $10, no more than $2,500 for demolition.
Okay.
So there's a range, a wide range. And then the second one, not less than $10, no more than $300 for all other offenses. Now, yes, each one, each day that it's in violation,
Well, and I mean, I'm
before
not-
you correct it, can be a problem, but it's not the numbers you were putting
Well,
out.
no, I'm referring to the draft ordinance, and I mean, I know that's not final. My point is as a homeowner, I'm being turned into a criminal here where I'm
I
facing
understand what your point
these
is.
daily fines.
I understand
whatever
what
they
your
might
point
be.
is, and I can't, like,
Right.
I may not be able to change your mind
Well-
on that point, but I'm just trying to correct.
Right, well, I mean, the whole bigger picture is can we get rid of all this part that speaks to changes to existing homes and only focus on the demolition and properties or house sizes, which everybody seems to be concerned about?
And honestly, I think you're really close to where we're at with the idea of the
Yeah.
conservation district, because it's just demolition, new construction, and
I had a
moving
structure to
building.
my house, it's qualified.
Additions don't qualify in a
structure.
conservation district.
No,
It
it's in there. It
specifically says that.
It says
Now,
any new.
No,
Again,
now, hold on, he's looking at the
I'm
conservation.
looking
this-
at the model ordinance that we put forward. I looked at this specifically today. And an addition would be under a full historic district,
Okay, so,
because that is an exterior alteration to a building.
okay, so I don't want to get in the weeds on this.
Mhm.
I think you have a very valid point, and that's what needs to be addressed in the FAQs. I agree with you 100%. That's something we need to look at.
Okay.
We hear you.
And I know this is all draft and I don't.
Yeah, no, but we need feedback like
But
that.
that's what the draft does say. The draft currently says if you add a structure to your property, whether it's historic property or not, it currently would fall under this draft ordinance. And maybe that's what could be cleaned up.
And that's why I was trying to say earlier to somebody else who stepped up that the idea of that draft ordinance that you have, kind of setting it aside and using the model ordinance just to create the commission. Now, some of the points you're making are in this ordinance. And so if you want input into what that looks like, that's welcomed. And I'm just trying to clarify that what's in the model ordinance that's based on state enabling legislation isn't exactly the same as what you're talking about. So,
Okay, no, thank you.
Thank you. Great point.
I had a brief comment too. I just wanted to say that there are enforcement penalties for zoning too. So I would take the comment to be right size those penalties if we move forward with this. And I agree, that's a very valid comment. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Danielle Pizette. I live at 110 North Third Street here in the village.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I don't have a question, but you appear to be taking a tally of some sort. You're asking people if they're for or against. Okay.
Yeah, do you want to know why? Do you want me to explain?
Oh, well, I guess there's my question.
Okay, so
Just wanted to make
that's a
sure.
great question. I am taking a tally because 2 years ago when I met with this group and they showed me that survey and they said the X amount of people want this and the X amount of people don't want this. I said, great, I will listen to everybody that talks. And if, as I've said from the very beginning, for any of my constituents, if a majority of the people that show up to this meeting or send me emails say they don't want it, I'm done. And that's not what happened tonight so far, unless people want to keep coming home, they're watching this live. So,
yeah,
and that's fine. I'm gonna listen to all my constituents and I'm gonna take a tally all day, every day.
Totally. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure then I was
Very transparent.
tallied. That's all that I
I
support.
do have one in the middle, by the way.
I
Who didn't want to conform to either side, which was fine, so I put them in the middle.
Perfect.
See?
So.
Yeah, we're all taking the
You were
tally.
saying
I-
you support or don't
Yeah, so I was
support?
just saying, I just wanted to acknowledge I didn't have a question and that
Do
I
you
was.
support?
I support the commission.
Awesome.
And the conservation. And to that note, a few times it's been
I'm glad you
mentioned,
asked that, actually.
just the, the cost of saving or keeping or upkeeping a home. I also see this as an opportunity to protect the small homes, allowing opportunity for people of different income levels to
Yeah.
live in the home. So certainly the
I
village is
thought that was an
eclectic.
amazing question. I would.
So, it's eclectic. There is a variety of size
Mhm.
as it is. So protecting that variety from here on out. I know on my block alone, a house in the last year has sold for 1.2 million and another has sold for $250,000. And I think that's awesome. I think
Yeah.
it's so awesome that
Yep.
there's a variety of different income levels. And what I would fear is if there wasn't a preservation, that $250,000 home would be torn down, put a huge home on it, and now nobody can buy a house for 250,000. So
Thank
that's my
you.
2 cents.
That's awesome.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Overbeck, 240 North Main Street. Are we still doing that? So I high-fived Danielle because on the way out, she said, I don't understand. They told me we were supposed to say questions and concerns. And so I didn't think I was supposed to come up here and talk. And so I said, yeah, man, now is the time. We have the mayor here. We have many town council members here, but that wasn't really clear. So we've had a lot of people who have actually been in support who have left and said, I just didn't have any questions, but I love it. So I just want to kind of make that known. So it's obviously probably not going to be shocking that I support this as I have devoted 2 years of my life to it. What Danielle spoke of affordability in the village, was a lot of why I was interested in this. I thought it was kind of sad that I'm seeing these affordable houses where single moms can come in, you know, people that don't have a ton of money can still be a part of our community. I heard people on our street saying, we're never going to tear our house down. We're freaking lucky to be here. Like, we're lucky we could afford to buy this house. We're going to make it work for our families. And I said, that's great. And all I was seeing on Main Street was demolition of small houses and new houses being built, granted variances. And now these are $1 million homes. So that's changing. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, that's gentrification. And it's happening in one of the wealthiest areas of Indiana. We are gentrifying our already very expensive place to live. And that's where I got into this. It was just the love of the historic houses and wanting people of all socioeconomic statuses to be able to live in the village. I do have questions. I've just been taking notes because I want you guys to answer things. I think I wanted to state about our survey is that we brought that survey to the mayor. We brought that survey to every member of the town council. Maybe not every member. I think we actually just focused on those in the district, but I think it's circulated. And we said, what can we do to change this so that it's not subjective? Give us your feedback. Give us your opinions. Tell us what questions are too leading. And they did. Alex Troy made a suggestion and we changed our survey. So we gave our town leaders the ability to give us input so we weren't trying to make a leading survey. You know, I've heard concerns that, how did they go through this process? We mailed it out. We sent people door to door to say, answer your survey. We did that twice. We sent you a postcard that said, please answer your survey. We gave you all the opportunity to say no, and 20 to 30 people did. It wasn't that people weren't afraid of saying no. I want to speak to the Lees. Yes. Cool. So please. So one of the things I remember is your heat map. You said my house isn't on the heat map. It's not. I can see it. The difference is, I'll pull it up. I know where you live, 3rd and Poplar. I can pull.
All right, Chelsea, let's just one at a time.
Yeah. So I wanted to explain the way the heat map works specifically was a range of what you answered yes or no to. So it was 10 questions. You know, we didn't just say, want a conservation district or not? We gave you 10 questions. A lot of them, people said yes all the way down the line. Their house is in a big green bright bubble. A lot of people said no all the way down the line. Their house is in a big red bubble. A lot of people said 50-50, yes or no. I like these things. No, I don't like these things. If I remember, you guys answered a few yes, a few no. So yours is a little bit of a faded red. So you're a little smaller red dot. If you have a problem with the color, I think there's actually an explanation on there at the top.
I don't know.
Yeah, you're pink, but you're included. So I just wanted to say, we didn't doctor the survey. We didn't try to hide it. We also put every single question, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. You said yes, you said no. We had people who didn't answer. We had people just returned at that very end that said, yep, I want this. And they left all the other ones blank. So those were included also. So I just wanted to give some background information about the survey. We really didn't try to make it leading, because if we had gotten 500 no's, I would have just stayed home. I would have just been like, yeah, I'm out. That's not fun for me. Just as Joe said, like, we're not trying to force this upon people. The thing about the realtors, we sat down with every single real estate agency in this town. We gave them our presentation. We asked them for their feedback. We asked them about questions, and they were all supportive. So we had a few that said, you know, there's a few concerns. We're just not sure how this is going to work, but we understand that it happens all over Indiana and they're fine. So we have hope that we're fine. They actually gave us a lot of feedback that they were having people not wanting to build in the village anymore because it's changing so much. So a lot of people were supportive, but we did speak to every realtor. We sat down with every office, Tucker, Century 21. We did get their feedback. And we asked them, I think we asked for comments. I have a whole list of comments if we want to share at the town council. Okay, now to questions. Oh, one last thing. I also sat down with Paul and Wayne DeLong, and I agree that the zoning needs to change. And I even said to you, I said, this seems like a really good solution to our problem. And the only thing we kept circling back to was demolition. Like, it was protection for historic houses isn't existent in the zoning. I love that the zoning is changing, and I think that it's a huge step forward to a solution, but it doesn't cover everything. There's still big gaps. We still can demolish anything. So hence why the conservation district. Okay, I do have questions. Can you please, okay, we talked about the vagueness of the guidelines. So can you clarify to us, can you answer, I guess, the guidelines you have on your model ordinance, are those our conservation district's guidelines?
No.
No. Okay, so.
I assume you're directing
Yeah.
this to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those aren't our guidelines. So how
No,
do our
so the-
guidelines actually get imposed? Because that's what's, when you see rhythm, when you see 11 things and it's like height, rhythm, are those the rules that I have to take and have for my conservation district if that's what I want?
So there is a separate section under, I think, talks about definitions, and there is a definition of preservation guidelines. So the commission is allowed to adopt preservation guidelines, and then those are developed for each designated area or property of the community. So you have, and then that is a responsibility of the community, the town, meaning the town, to work with and the commission to work with the property owners and that are affected by that designation to develop the preservation plan. So it's not the town saying this is the way it's going to be. It's working together to get a good product.
So can you give us an example? Like, let's say Indianapolis, they have several conservation districts on the book. Can you give me an example of what one portion of their design guidelines would look at? Like, let's say, for example, porches. Can you tell me, like, does it just say you have to have a porch, you don't have to have a porch? Is it incredibly prescriptive? Is it really vague? Does it say porches have to be a specific style? Can you give us like a better example?
Are you talking about in a conservation district?
Yes.
There is no porch
Oh,
review.
there's no porch review in a conservation district?
Demolition and, well, I mean, if it's part of a new build, then yes, you
Okay.
would look at what that looks like, but on an existing structure, no.
But
That's considered an exterior alteration.
Okay, so I've got a question about that, but can you explain, so if I'm building a new house and I've been told that these are to taste, very vague standards that actually haven't been written yet. So we were clarifying, these haven't actually even been written. The commission does that. Can you give me what would the wording kind of be around a new construction porch? Like, is this going to be something where it's like 2 sentences that explains what the rhythm of a porch is? Or is this going to be like a paragraph, a page? Is there going to be pictures? Are there going to be diagrams for me to say, this is what a porch on a new house would look like?
I wish I had the visual for you. There are guidelines that are developed for a single district that can be this thick, that break down every section, whether you're talking about, repairing masonry or, a building new, what the roof shapes might look like, or, a porch there are different shapes and forms and materials that you could be looking at that relate to or are different than the structure itself. What is the porch floor going to be made of? What is the foundation going to look like? So there are various different aspects of how you look at it, and those are all going to be spelled out within a section on porches.
And the commission decides that, and the commission writes it, and the commission talks, and that's a process that we're all involved in?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, I think that helps me clarify at least like some of the vagueness and this list that we have of 11 things, but we're not required to do all 11 of those things, are we? Those compatibility standards?
The 11 things are meant to be, I think, sort of, I don't know if I'll use the right term here, guideposts
Yeah,
to a commissioner in terms of an application that comes in, and then they're looking at the application, in this case, a conservation district for a new build. How does, the question was asked earlier about rhythm. Well, how, if this is a mid-block structure, what's going on either side of it? And then how does this, is this sort of completely different, or is it similar to what's already there? It's looking at the greater context. And so every one of those 11 things are going to be sort of, guiding principles on how you would approach an application.
Can I just say one thing for
Yeah.
Chelsea? That is the whole reason why we're going to a commission ordinance.
Okay,
Is
so I
the-
think that's a little confusing too,
Yes.
is we had an ordinance online from the town that has touched a lot of people's hands, and a lot of people modified it, and a lot of people had opinions, and everyone kind of put in their 2 cents. What you're suggesting is we're not gonna follow that draft ordinance anymore. We're gonna now have an ordinance that creates a commission.
Yep.
And then there will be subsequent ordinances after that that actually create individual districts.
Correct.
Okay, so that draft ordinance that is saying all these things, we can kind of wipe slate clean and ignore. It's gone. We're gonna have this
There will be some-
commission
yeah,
established
so-
with rules.
Yes, absolutely. You're going to separate the proposed ordinance that is online into a preferably built by landmarks on what the process is to create a historic commission. That way, other communities within Zionsville can propose any ordinance they want for the district that they have.
For them,
I don't know if you were here when I started out my portion of the presentation, but I want you to know that I acknowledged a lot of people in this room that worked on the draft that's out there now, because I recognize that 2 years plus worth of work was put into that, and a lot of information gathering and talking to people and creating a vision for what the thought that the village could be and should be going forward. So I realize that this, for some people, may be difficult to say, we're sort of setting that aside now and looking at the ordinance to create the commission. But I think it's a more careful, well thought out process going forward, that we've got the commission, and then the commission is the one that makes the recommendation to the council on what, if any, districts are made in the future. And that anybody who lives within one of those potential districts has the right or the ability to be involved and engaged in that process.
Awesome. Other question. So it sounded like this first draft kind of affected remodeling homes. Your new draft, the conservation district, does not affect remodeling homes. So we had a lady that stood up and said, I don't want to have to change my windows. I don't want to have to pay more to do this. Is anyone going to be forced to make any changes to their existing property? And B, when they make those changes, do they actually have to get a certificate of appropriateness? If I remodel my existing historic home or my new house, do I have to come to you to see if I'm going to get new windows, or if I want to change out my screen door, or if I want to change my roofing material? Am I required to get a certificate of appropriateness in a conservation district?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Okay. I'm trying to think of lots of other things I want to spend money on. I want to put up a fence. Do I have to go to you?
Not in, I'm trying to think, new construction. Somebody else was talking earlier about what defines a structure. I think that's something we would look at as part of the process of the adoption of the ordinance and
Define it.
Preservation plan to define what that means in that district. If we hear from a majority of property owners, we don't want fences regulated in our neighborhood, then that could be something that could be left out.
Awesome. So we still have the ability to have input and to shape this.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Another question. Do all houses within a conservation district require demolition review? So if I've heard a lot today of like, I had a really crappy old house, this thing was falling apart. I guess this is 2 questions. Ooh, it is 2 questions. One, does everyone that wants to buy a house here to tear down have to come to you?
No,
Oh, no. Why?
because they
So-
either have to be contributing or outstanding.
Okay, so there are still. Or
No,
notable.
sorry.
Okay, so we're only requiring demolition review for a subsequent of historic houses.
No, we do not.
Can we know the answer to that question?
She's asking if it's a conservation district.
My answer to that
Would be-
question, which may be slightly different, is that I think that once you determine the boundaries of a conservation district or historic district, that is when you say that the buildings within, the properties within those boundaries are subject to the review of the Historic Preservation Commission,
All of them.
all of them.
What if a majority of the village residents don't want that? What if they say, I don't want non-contributing, non-historic houses to be protected with demolition review?
I think, yeah, it's a good question. I think what we would have to look and see is how the ordinance reads. If the ordinance reads that they do have to be subject to that, then they're going to have to be subject to that. If, the thing about an enabling ordinance, again, re-emphasizing this that we mentioned earlier, is that this isn't just going to apply to the village. And just because village people want a certain thing, just because they want a certain way to approach how they will be dealing with the commission in the future, doesn't mean that another property owner or district in the community don't want a different way, like they may want to be a full historic district. So it's just, I think we have to leave that door open. And
Oh, yeah,
I'd
no,
rather leave
I
it
assume
open
this
than
would be a
closed.
part of the actual, not the commission ordinance, but like our conservation district ordinance. Is there a way to
Proposal.
separate those into that, or?
I was looking at this earlier and I'm pretty sure that it said, I could be proven wrong again. I'm sure I have in my life at various points, but that all contributing, non-contributing buildings both are reviewed within the boundaries of a district. So, doing a subsequent ordinance that is counter to the enabling ordinance wouldn't seem wise.
I think these are like valid points that we all need to consider, because we came with the purpose of doing something, and we came with and I think, I'm not asking these questions because I want to try to like softball them. I want these questions to be answered for all of us to consider. If we have to have demolition review for every single type of house, that might be something that the village people aren't
And Chelsea,
wanting.
I would rather sit here today and say, at this moment and say, I'd rather check for you and get an accurate answer for you than to BS you and give you wrong information. So I'm more than happy to come back to the ordinance, find the right place in there as to what it says, and let you know, and you can spread the word to other residents.
As a part of the FAQs, it'll be in one
I leave that up to
spot.
you guys to get that information to people.
Absolutely, it's a great question.
I swear I'm almost done. I'm sorry, guys. I am trying to be fast. Do we know what it's going to cost to request a certificate of appropriateness at this time? Think of anyone?
There's no cost that I know of.
I
Unless-
assume there's some kind of fee for the,
In the FAQ that's posted on the town's website, it does speak to a fee. That fee has been estimated on the cost of legal staffing and the cost of per year.
No, they're just asking if someone has to apply for a COA.
I'm just asking for, because I heard several
Yes.
people say I have to now pay for a certificate of
The town
appropriateness. so
published
that's
an FAQ that gives an affirmative answer to that question.
Okay.
And the answer to that question is based upon if the ordinance wants to be cost neutral. This is a policy decision, of course. Certainly, if the town would like to be neutral, that's a choice. If it wants to make money or revenue, that's another choice.
Okay.
But the cost to administrate the board is $7,500 a year if Indiana Landmarks is engaged. You would also, I'm assuming, hire legal counsel for the very reasons that have been mentioned this evening. I do not know what an attorney would cost per year. I'm assuming there's some sort of retainer at a minimum. We've estimated that at $12,000. So that's $19,500. You divide that number by, staff looks at the number of permits that we've issued in the last 24 months. In this district that may or may not be exactly the boundaries that are listed on the map. That comes out to about $860 a permit if you wanted to be cost neutral. That does not count the $20,000 a year in overhead, including the staff time, education, board training, things like that. So if you choose to raise or lower that delta, that's what that number would be. But again, you're asking many of the questions that you're asking are policy related, which are not necessarily decided at this moment.
Okay, and that would change potentially then if we have a commission and there are more districts. Like if there are more areas, I assume that cost.
You could spread the cost.
You would spread the cost, right?
Yes, yep.
Okay, so more districts would be more cost effective.
And we could certainly, to help the town look at best practices in terms of other commissions and what they're doing in this approach, because I have the feeling it's probably everything from zero being charged for a COA to some, I don't know what Indianapolis charges. I know Meg Pernsley was here earlier, but we could find out, what the range is. But I think having something backed off that's reasonable for home owners and building owners in the city would be what we would try to achieve.
Okay, and that fee would go to demolition and new construction.
In a conservation
In a
district, correct?
conservation district. I think that's all the questions I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
I do want to provide a point of clarification. Mr. Culp mentioned mentioning about the pulling down off the website, the draft ordinance. I do want to be very clear.
I didn't say that.
Okay, you didn't? Okay, then I will.
Okay.
Nope, never said that.
Okay, great.
I have to go watch this now.
All right, very good.
He said putting it aside.
Okay, very good.
That was Mark.
Okay, Mark.
You can blame me on
For the record, very good.
I'm Alex Silverbeck. I live with Chelsea and I am in support of the conservation district and mirror a lot of the sentiments that she has. But I have heard a lot of really tragic stories about people that have built construction and have had a bad time. And I'm curious from both of your organizations if you've done any research into whether or not your work, either of your work, helps resolve some of that civil unrest once you've done your job, I guess.
Can you repeat the last part, whether it helps?
So there are people that in the town that have had a really bad time when they've done new construction, and maybe that's residents of the town feeling like they have to have vigilante justice or something because they don't have protection. And I'm curious if either of you have done any research into whether that solves that problem.
I have not. I'm sorry. I don't
No, it's
I
not.
don't have a great answer.
Mostly
for you.
curious.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll comment anecdotally, and I made some comments last week during the shred too. I feel like what planning and zoning and even though we've talked about the conservation district as being not zoning, we've also talked about how to implement a conservation district. You need a plan. What you get when you create a plan is you get, I think, that vision that exists between people, right? And it can be something that everybody believes in. And that's why I do this work. Some of the stories that I heard last week were about, all of the stories that I heard last week really were about how much people love this town. And one of the things I think I started on the first day saying that, if you love the town you live in, if you love the place that you live in, the worst thing you can do is nothing, because it's going to change, and it will change based on people's individual impressions of what should happen rather than based on a plan. So I think in going through this process and even having this meeting tonight as a community, you hear from people in the community that all have, good intent. People come here to raise their family, to be a part of a community that they have identified as being a place they want to come to and live in. And that is, the reason why it's an anecdotal answer is that I can tell you that I've worked in communities where we go through a visioning process, we create a plan, we create the ordinance, and we call it, I use the term living plan, and it's not actually the book or the words that we put on the paper that gives it life. It's the people that live in that community because it's their plan. And you got to keep doing it. We heard from Ralph about some of his perspective, and I talked with him last week about living here and seeing it change. It's not something that stops after tonight. It's something that we, keep working on. The other thing I like to say just is about predictability. I use the term predictability a lot. In having a code and a commission, what you can create is that predictability, so that essentially it's self-policing. I actually said this in my presentation tonight, right? What we want to do is create a code that nudges people to the right answer, to the answer that is valued by the community. And then you get voluntary enforcement. A lot of what I do is just help people to understand what codes are and to make that right decision. So I think, yes, in an ideal situation and with a community that's having these types of discussion, the whole purpose is to resolve those kind of conflicts and to create a vision that people feel comfortable with. But is everyone going to be satisfied in every situation? Is there never going to be a meeting that goes wrong? Is there never going to be a decision that goes wrong? No, that's democracy. That's what we're doing tonight, right?
I think that's why one of the big reasons why I'm for one or both of these solutions is that it establishes expectations and hopefully helps solve some of the problems that people have faced.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I am unfortunately Alex Lee's other half. He might not want to claim me after this. No, he always claims me, fortunately. I live at 80 North 3rd Street. I want to get into the record about the survey. This is on their website. So I just want everybody to hear this because it's kind of important to me. I'm a numbers person too. 413 surveys were sent out. Fantastic. 207 people responded. Wonderful. So that's a 50% response rate. Of those 50% who responded, 81% wanted the district. So if you look at the number, it's not quite like overwhelming majority. Half the people in the area didn't respond. So again, it's kind of self-selecting. So I just want to have those numbers out there so people understand that this survey is a self-selecting survey, as many surveys are. People will respond if they want to respond. Right? It's like going to vote. So those who care will say something. Those who don't care will live with the consequences. But I do think it's important that you understand the numbers of the survey.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of the numbers. Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's really important. I don't know. I've heard Ralph speak like many, many times at this point. And I feel sad because I know this town has changed over time and it hasn't stood still. And as much as we want things to stand still, they're not going to. Things are going to happen. Houses are going to fall down. Our house, we had the wherewithal. We just put in 40 feet of, what are those? Steel beams and 9 jacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were lucky enough we had the wherewithal to do that. Otherwise, our house would have slowly started to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you do then? Because then it becomes a hazard.
Mm-hmm.
So so I think unfortunately time moves on, different things happen, things change. So yes, I think having this conservation panel or like group commission is probably the best way to go for our town right now. I don't know, once they're up there making all their decisions, will I support a conservation district? Will I support a historic district? I don't know yet. But I like the idea of a conservation group coming in with qualified individuals. Ralph, I don't know if you were an architect or something like that qualifies you. So that's perfect, Ralph.
You're hired.
Bam.
Mayor, you make sure you take note of that, okay?
But I think my whole point is we have to, the whole democratic process here tonight, thank you for doing this, first of all. Thank you for listening to us. Yes, I think the commission is the right way to go. Is the conservation or historic district? Probably not for myself. I don't want somebody telling you that I can or cannot do something to my home. And am I willing to preserve my home? Clearly I am, because I just put in a whole bunch of money into it. So, but not everybody can do that either. So not every house in my mind is worth saving. Not every person should be condemned for doing something where they buy a house and they have shown and proven perhaps to whomever that this house is no longer significant. So I do think this is worthwhile and it's a good discussion. I just feel like it seems like this group up here is very positive towards this. So I understand you're historic guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what-
Well, you know, that kind of makes sense.
But I do want to say thank you because, not to overlook what you just said about reinvesting in your property, because you could have made a different decision and gone a different way. And
Yeah,
yet
it's awesome.
you put money into the property that you lived in. And I think that's to be applauded. So thank you.
Your home's beautiful, so if you sell it, let me know.
You can have it all the wanting if you want.
I don't have time once, but I got a little confused. Just want to ask the question, was the survey was that a volunteer survey or was that a government survey that went out?
It's been volunteer.
It was volunteer, okay, because the way it's being talked about, it almost feels like a vote. And I didn't know that we had the vote. And so that's why going back to it was a volunteer survey. It wasn't government
Correct.
sponsored. It wasn't a vote. It was just people knocking on doors trying to ask a question.
Yep.
Okay. Mail, yeah, sent out. Yeah, I understood. There's a lot of people that knock on my door, mail me things all the time, and I don't always answer it. So, I mean, I don't know how often you get solicited. I get solicited a lot. So I was unaware, you can believe me or not, but I was unaware. I have a feeling there are others like me that were unaware and now are aware. So I
want to address that real quick. That is why we're here tonight.
Oh, I hear you.
Yeah,
And
that's what's
and
awesome. That's what's been so great about tonight.
Agree. And that's, a lot of people care about the community. It's a
Yeah.
good community. We're all, trying to be the best neighbor we can be. I totally believe that. But just to make the point, it was a volunteer survey. If we're going to do something that's more formal, we're really going to count on it. My own opinion is that it should be a little bit more, everyone have the input.
Have
not
more
just
heft to it.
Yeah, like
maybe.
exactly. That's a good word. Have more heft to it. I like that.
Okay,
I'm
thank
out.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks. I can't wait. Yes.
We're here all night.
It's like a comedy show. I think this is really going to boil down to, the qualifications of the commissioners. If a commission is formed, it really boils down, to the mayor's ability to find and recruit, qualified people who are willing to devote their time, without pay, to review all these designs and provide really thoughtful feedback and all of that. And maybe for the first 2 or 3 years, we'll be successful at that because, there's a lot of energy in the room and it's like, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, that commission will still exist. It's like one of those things where like, once you give power to a group of people, that's going to take on a life of its own, it may be more difficult to, relinquish that power back. So it all boils down to the qualifications of these people, the faith and the trust that we put in these people to interpret these very subjective rules in a certain way, and the power that we've given them. It's kind of like you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk, and and depending on how, like I think. What was your name again? Sir? Mark. You showed some examples of houses that were approved by a commission that looked pretty modern, pretty jazzy, snazzy houses, and would be very interesting. And my guess is that in other communities, people are very conservative and want to conform to a style of architecture that seems 100 years old or may be very outdated, things like that. I guess my concern is that this commission will, may not function the way that we think it will 20 years from now, or may become dysfunctional, or it may be difficult to find qualified individuals who are willing to do all this work without pay. And it may become dominated by, the same kind of people that are on my homeowners association board who don't want to, I live in an HOA where every house looks the same, and, every fence has to be black, and they tell you what kind of shingles you want on your house. And, it's a pain, and it really, so I guess here's my question is like, what recourse will property owners have if the commission becomes unreasonable and sends people back to the drawing board 6 times and, or delays the permitting process indefinitely, or just simply refuses to issue a certificate of appropriateness to certain projects? And, what if the owner suspects that these refusals are motivated by politics or favoritism of some form of discrimination, or, we've given all this power to these group of wise men and women that, but what if it becomes dysfunctional? What if they refuse to issue permits to, or, what can we, how can we design the commission with limits to their authority, or, to ensure that they're, I don't know, don't overreach and overprescribe everything, with such subjectivity. Chelsea was talking about these 11 points that are so open to interpretation that, it may become impossible to build even the simplest thing without, going back to the drawing board 6 times and racking up. I don't care if maybe the COA only cost me $100, but my architect charges $200 an hour. If I have to go back 6 times and just to please this commission, it's going to be a lot more expensive. So anyway, I don't know if there's even an answer to that question, but that I want to highlight, the risk of doing this, and, the challenge that the mayor faces in trying to find these people and then retain them for the next 50 years. It's going to, be hard, to do that. So I don't know if you've got an opinion or an answer for that question or not.
My thought, first of all, the ordinance is passed and boards appointed by your elected officials. And if there is rather than just yourself being disgruntled, but a significant number of people that are going, this board is like out of whack and really needs to be reined in some way, I would say at that point, somebody needs to sit down with the elected officials and communicate that message. Just because, the commission turned you down one time and you aren't satisfied with that outcome doesn't mean that should result in the city council or town council revoking the preservation ordinance. I would say to the question about 50 years out, are they going to be, kooky or whatever? I mean, I would say, look to the 3,000 other historic preservation commissions in the United States that, as I said earlier, have been around since the 1930s. They're not, I
don't know. I've heard some horror stories.
I've heard some
horror stories on that stuff there.
And, right here in Zionsville, I'm sure you have other boards and commissions that exist that, hopefully those aren't being irresponsible or acting in a way that the community doesn't support. So, I understand your maybe caution in going into this, and I do, because it's, anytime we embrace change, it's, something that maybe we want to be cautious. I'm a preservationist. I mean, I don't like a lot of change, and I get your point, but at the same time, this isn't necessarily, preservation commissions aren't necessarily about the past. They're about the future and the growth of the community and guiding what occurs in the future with the structures that the community proposes.
And I tend to agree with you, and I like what you say, but I just would fear that the members of the commission may not have embody the same spirit.
And I can't guarantee you what's going to happen 50 years from now, but I'm not going to be here to worry about it. So, somebody is, but I'm not.
So Ralph will still be here.
Yeah, there you go.
I would just validate the question. I mean, it's a good question. And I would say, there's an appeals process that will be set up. So there would be an appeals process.
Well, I ask that as you write this ordinance for the town council's consideration, that you give some serious thought to the structure and the sort of the checks and balances, of this commission, and don't let it take on, too much power and authority to tell everybody what they can build and what they can't build, and
does that mean overly change your vote to now being in favor if we do?
No.
Hold on, I gotta make my little mark. Wait, I'm putting you in the middle. I'm putting you in the middle.
But I can see where this is going, and if it's inevitable and it's gonna happen, then it just needs to happen in a way that, is reasonable and efficient
Right.
and,
I get it.
is not overly restrictive and telling everybody what they can't do, and I think that we as property owners that enjoy a lot of rights and privileges to do with our properties what we want to do. And, if we want to live in a cookie cutter HOA, there's plenty to choose from, but, we live in the village partially because we can do what we want with the property and we have a eclectic taste and we can paint our house purple, and, that's cool. I love that, And
Just to quickly address your point, I checked with the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Commission and asked, how many of your certificates of appropriateness do you approve in a given year? 93% of the applications for COAs are approved. So the idea
is
is
first time around or approved eventually.
I didn't drill down to that point.
My architect told me that when he
93%.
does a project in the city that he has to address the Indianapolis Historic Preservation Committee, his fees increased by about $10,000 just to manage that whole process. And create
that's
all the
what-
paperwork, the documentation, go to the meetings and revise the drawings and that,
And what Indianapolis, their fee structure is not going to be comparable to what it is in Zionsville.
No, I'm talking about his fees to his clients. My architect has to work so many extra hours to prepare all the documentation and go to the meetings and explain the design and go back and reiterate the design. And, it's, he said $10,000, but that's a lot of billable hours at $200 an hour.
That is a lot. I don't know what he's working on.
Yeah,
but that's a
right.
lot.
But that's what he
But
said.
Did you get 3 opinions?
Pardon?
Did you get 3 quotes at least?
Yeah.
I wanted to assure you that there is some, I don't think we're trying to get people to yes, not to no. So that's the aim or the goal in the commission, because, it benefits the community to see these things being built and for the community to continue. We're not saying let's pickle it like it was in 1800. So let's keep it going.
All right. Well, I'm still against it, but
That's
okay.
We hear you.
Anybody else? Oh, there we go.
Hey, I'm Janet Stutzman, 210 South 2nd Street, and I just moved here in mid-June. So I don't know anything about anything that's been going up till June, but boy, has there been a lot since. And I think it's been a little bit confusing. I went down and I printed out Indiana codes and looked at those, and it looked to me like the proposed ordinance says it was written and posted on the town website was pretty much just based on that insofar as it was talking about establishing a commission.
Yep.
And then just left alone what the standards or the compatibility standards were that had been written by the committee earlier. Because the commission, once it's appointed, will set its own compatibility standards. Is that correct? Okay. So I noticed that one of the changes in the ordinance was that you had someone had included that paint color would not be included when in certificates of appropriateness. Whereas it noted within the Indiana statutes that color could be considered. So my first question is, when you do this new ordinance draft that'll be put out, can you remove some of those things that commissions are authorized to do by the state of Indiana, but that we do not wish to be included here in Zionsville?
Can I address, I want to address the paint color one specifically.
Yeah, sure.
So you're right, paint colors is a potential reviewable activity in a historic district.
Right.
But the enabling legislation was years later amended so that with each designation ordinance, that designated area can decide whether or not they want paint colors to be reviewed. Okay. So I would say leave it in the enabling ordinance, but then if the village or some other subsequent area wants to be designated, they could say, we don't want paint colors reviewed, and it's left out, or we do and it's included.
So in terms of efficiency for the town of Zionsville, to just duplicate exactly what the state says. All of these things can be considered by the commission. And make it very clear, all the people in Zionsville, that we're not necessarily going to do these things.
Correct. Yes, that's what Chelsea was trying to say
Right.
earlier. Absolutely.
Okay, so then one of the things that I had noticed was where it was talking about existing outstanding, contributing, and notable homes. If they have anything that is noticeable on the exterior done, any significant changes, those would have to have a certificate of appropriateness. But then tonight, on the slide that was shown, it said that no, in interior and exterior changes do not require a certificate of appropriateness. So that was confusing to me.
For existing structures in a conservation district.
Right.
You would not need a certificate of appropriateness.
Okay, so
If it's a full-fledged, it steps up to that full.
Historic or preservation, right, yeah.
Then yes, you would
Okay.
have to come for any exterior changes to the structure.
Okay.
For a COA.
Because that was also included in the standards, which will be revised, and that'll be taken out then, obviously, okay. Okay, and I forgot my other question.
Well, those
Thank you.
are good ones.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Walters?
Mark Walters, 545 West Poplar. I vowed that I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but I can't help it. I am so grateful to all these people who came out here tonight and who've even stayed through this whole thing. It's amazing to hear and see this. It makes me so proud to be living where I do, and the dedication, pro and con, that people have to doing the right thing for our village. It is so affirming, and it really made it worthwhile the last couple of years we've been at this, pulling our hair out. And we are just a bunch of private people, so we did the best we could. And I must tell you, it's a relief, frankly, to have the town engaged and involved, and people like Wayne and Amy and the attorneys, because I think we're going to get this right. And I'm so happy about that. And I think it's going to be something that we can look at 50 years from now, Ralph, and say, wow, we did a really good thing for our community. So thank you all, and especially you guys. Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Sure.
So what was the tally?
The tally I have, Mr. Burke, what's your tally? Diversion, it's awesome.
14 yes, 8 no, 3 not sure.
Oh, exact. 14, 8, and 3. 14 for it, 8 no, and 3 undecided. And I'm still wanting to get yours in the middle. We'll go out later. No, that's kidding. But no, on a serious note, gosh, thanks. I mean, this was awesome. I mean, when you talk about the amount of people that have been part of this, that are sitting in this room and stayed this late, I learned so much every time we have these kind of discussions. I appreciate the administration and all their help. I mean, the last month with their group, that we wouldn't even be here right now as well. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of good people, a lot of enthusiasm. I think at this point, Wayne and I will sit back and take all this information, hopefully with a beverage, and look at everybody's feedback and get as many of those FAQs, answered and on the website as soon as possible. As Wayne and I've talked about, unfortunately, anything that really has to do with any district that can't be proposed until a commission is created, it's gonna be difficult to answer a lot of those questions because there's so much good feedback tonight. It could change, as I've learned. This ordinance can change 300 times in a day, right, Amy? She's shaking her head. But we have the right people on board now, and the right people to at least propose a commission. I will tell everybody this, it will be an open meeting as well in front of the town council. I don't know exactly how this worked. Wayne and I talked about this before because I've not been privy to a town council member presenting on a proposed ordinance, so I'm not sure how that works. I want everybody to know that'll be public as well. So if there's our remonstrators against this, that is still your right as a citizen to come to that meeting. So this is not, like I said earlier, this is not, okay, we're all good to go, we're starting tomorrow. There's a lot of work to go, and it may not make it through council. I have no idea. So, and like I promised all my constituents, I will do what I can to get it to the finish line, but at the end of the day, it'll be up to the council. So, yes.
So will there be an opportunity for the public to review?
Absolutely.
whatever eventual draft has come up with before?
Yes, so that's where landmarks comes in, and we are going to make sure it is as identical as possible with what the current statute to create a ordinance to have the ability to have a commission. And that will 100% be what, I don't want to speak for Wayne, but our idea was that would be created and give the opportunity for the public to talk at the town council meeting. So, and then I think everybody did a good job to make this clear as possible tonight, but there's gonna be a lot of people maybe watching this again, trying to figure out which way is up. But gosh, man, this is awesome feedback. Every single one of you pro, against, for, and I would say the results from the mayor and myself and Julie and the group, it was about like that, 50-50 pro and against. So, I mean, we've heard you, we got it. We got all the information we need, and we'll present it again at a later date and give you guys the opportunity to talk at that time as well. And it is my goal, if this moves on with the administration, to get something proposed to the town council before the end of the year for a commission, just a commission. That's it. So, and like we said, is a commission has no say whatsoever until an ordinance is created for a specific district, whether it's historic or conservation. Thanks, everybody.
Paul, you want to advance the slides too?